Mr. Thomas, if you'd let us know when the live stream's up.
And you are live.
Mr. Cormack, we're ready when you are.
Thank you very much for the facility meeting for today's date is April 11, 2023. We're talking about obsolete items. Mr. Delbert?
Okay, obsolete items for this month. The first thing we have is South Middle School textbooks that are obsolete and be donated. The second is the technology department. We have the March recycling list of a lot of laptops that are no longer used or obsolete. Next item is nutritional services. We have 2 POS computers and 1 reach-in refrigerator, which is will be sold on Municipal bid. That refrigerator is from South Middle School, so it's being replaced through the renovation project. So the next one is the maintenance department. We have a Caterpillar forklift TC30 that is seen its better days. It's leaking a lot of fluids and it's in pretty poor condition. So we're going to move that on to municipal bid. And then the last is North Middle School. They have an upright piano that is going to be put on public surplus, and it has a broken caster, and there are also fundamental issues with the construction of the piano, so make necessary repairs exceed the value of it. So it costs more to fix it than it's worth.
Let's see this there.
So yes, it's seen its day. So that's it for obsolete.
Any questions? No questions? Not hearing any? Let's go to number 3, District Support Center, walk-in freezer bid results. Mr. Hopper?
So this was a previously requested permission to go out to bid for an additional walk-in freezer at District Support Center. We followed the federal guidelines based on the funds that would be used if this was approved. We put a bid together. We had 2 bidders, and one was ASL Mechanical. They were not the low bidder. The low bidder was McCloskey Mechanical Contractors for a total of $135,500. And the recommendation is to move forward with the lower bidder, McCloskey Mechanical.
Sounds good to me.
Any questions? Here we go, moving on. Summer 2023 site work projects, CQA testing particulars. Mr. Harper, I'm assuming that's not you?
Sure, you know, yeah, so this is part of our site construction projects. It's a third-party quality control. This contractor verifies quantities, compaction rates, that are doing their job in the best interest of the district to make sure that we get the appropriate services that have been provided by the contractor. This went out to bid. The apparent low bidder is the same contractor we're using now, David Blackmore. And recommendation is to move forward with David Blackmore.
What was the disqualified ones?
So they did not provide, there's a deadline to submit their bid.
Right.
They did submit a bid, but they did not do it in time.
Yeah, but one of
They
them was a
should
day
follow.
late. I mean, can I see their pricing?
I believe we have that, but we had to disqualify because it became a 201 by the rules. We're not allowed to
Oh,
accept.
that's our rules, so we have to
That's
follow.
It's
Stay long.
Yeah.
You don't have to find. I'm just
And
curious.
we wish we had more people.
You think
to
they would
consider
know that?
bids. They just didn't make it in time.
That's fair. That's their fault.
Any other questions?
That answers that one. Thanks.
Moving forward.
Thank you. Annual testing for lead in drinking water. Mr. Harper, back to you.
Frequent flyer points. So this is annually required by all school districts in Pennsylvania by Pennsylvania Act 39. And if you look in the handout, or I can show you the one I have, we do representative testing in all of our schools. The previous year, we tested every drinking water source at West Rock Hill. This year, one of our tests in all the schools came back above the actionable level. So we isolated that source, and that source was at Grass Elementary, room 13. We isolated as soon as we got the results. And typically, we replace the faucet first, and then we'll retest, because that's typically the culprit of lead in the drinking water. Replaced it, retested it, and it was the culprit. It passed the test, and it's back in service today.
Awesome.
Great news. Good.
Are there other faucets that are like that could be bad next time?
So we've been doing this representative testing just because of the cost of the testing. We're making progress through all of the schools, doing different areas, and I believe in the next 2 years, we should be able to complete every drinking source. But we've gone through different pods, different areas, just trying to be representative of our testing, spreading it out, and we get less and less every year,
Okay.
so it's good news.
Okay, moving on, Gaga Pit at Siler Elementary. Do you want to hold on this one?
I can go for that one as well. So
There you go.
this is a request from the parent-teacher organization. They are funding an additional Gaga pit. If you don't know what a Gaga pit is, it's kind of like a dodgeball in a little corral. Apparently a popular game, almost all of our schools have them. This is the second one, I believe, at Siler, and again, it's totally funded by the parent-teacher organization. They're just looking for permission to move forward, because we will take ownership after the purchase.
Sounds good.
Who's doing
Or
installation?
outside
Do we have
activity.
any role in installation, or is this being handled
It-
completely?
It's totally outsourced. I
Okay.
believe one of the parents has either volunteered time and material to complete the construction of this, so it's totally not any burden on the school district.
Great.
And I've looked at the area, the site, everything's appropriate for where it's gonna go, so
And you'll get final approval.
I will probably be first in the Gaga pit.
Yes.
Send us
Dave,
pictures.
go throw 'em balls.
Videos.
Thank you. Okay, next Facilities Committee meeting is May 2nd, 2023.
And I didn't see anyone sign up
Nope.
since we got here, so, okay. Was there anyone on the finance
I don't think so.
public comment, please?
No, it's a blank slate.
Okay.
All right. Moving forward with Finance Committee, April 11th. Review of contracts for approval. Mr. Dahlberg, that'd be you.
All right, we have, first two contracts are for Keystone Freedom Academy. First is a reservation of placement for 5 students, at a discounted cost of $263,898 for the 2023-2024 school year. And the second one is for extended school year services, $5,500 per student, from June 26th through July 28th of 2023. The next contract is the Bucks County Community College. This contract is for the dual enrollment agreement, from August of 23 through August of 2024.
Is it the same as before? I mean, we've had it already.
It is the same. They have expanded the courses that are available, and so the review process, so there may be more opportunities for students to be able to get dual with Bucks, but the terms of the agreement are the same.
Okay, the next one is PBIS rewards at South Middle School. This is for the reward program for the 23-24 school year. Cost is $1,970, and this is a renewal. They did this program at South last year. And the next one is Johnson Controls. These are HVAC and controls annual contracts for all the district's buildings, July 1st to 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Cost is $154,907. And the final one is Music EDU. This is a suite subscription, $3,900. This provides software for the various music programs.
The PBIS rewards, what's the nature of those things that they offer?
This is the software that they use to keep track of the information, so it provides them, teachers can enter both positives and discipline into that, and then they can get reports and students earn points, and it's a mature version of like a class dojo that you might know at an elementary level. They don't have the avatars and things like that, but they've used it. Is this the third year, Dr. Scheid, or the second year at South that they've used the second year at South, and they've been very, very happy with it.
That's private? It's not posted?
Oh, correct.
Okay.
Correct, yeah, no.
All right. Moving on to the general fund review.
Yeah, we're gonna switch it up there a little bit and start with the program improvement and the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education budgets, and then do people services within the general fund. So that Dr. Barchak and Dr. Shai jump in and do it first.
I was just waiting for checks. You're fine. All right. So tonight we're going to present to you, obviously, the elementary and secondary education budgets for our office. So on the second slide, as you can see, from the 22-23 to the 23-24, both of our budgets have decreased slightly, and then overall, because of one of the main pieces is the PAE TEP, which we use for the teacher evaluation system. That is a 2-year contract, so that amount of money is not in our budgets for this year. It will be again next year, following year, and that's about $31,000 to $33,000 for the 2 years. But as you can see, we're going from, in the elementary budget, from 167 to 154, and just about 185 to 176 in the secondary budget.
Dr. Rabarchik, just because we talked about this previously, is there any sense on where you're going to come in on the budget? Because it's, when we talk about budget over budget, do we know actuals? So was the budget for 2022 to 2023, was that on target? Was it, can you project where we're going to end up? Do you follow what I'm
Mr. Dahlgren, I have to ask you that question.
So generally with these budgets, especially the program improvement budget, which is the first one there, those are for specific targeted things that we're gonna do, and those budgets come very, very close.
So there's not a whole lot of discretion.
There's not a whole lot of discretion there. Now, there is some discretion in the elementary education budget because we put a lot of staff development money in that, and then there is also some opportunities to fund that staff development with title money. But when we're doing these budgets, we don't necessarily know what and how much of that title money is going to come. So sometimes there's some extra there then that we can roll over into at the end of the year.
But Mr. Russell, to answer your question even further, the technology components of what's in our budget for the different licenses that we attribute to, those are pretty much, they're
Fixed
on the
costs.
nose. It's penny for penny in regards to what we budget and what's being charged to the district. So our budgets generally do come in pretty accurate to the exact amount.
What
Because
are
of
the
that.
main drivers in each category for the, when you say what, like, is it 80% fixed, or is it, you're saying there's some that you haven't agreed in price? I just want to understand what's in each one.
So if I go on, you'll see I actually have actuals in here, so I can talk
Well,
to that
I understand.
even further. Do you want to say about the program, the
Is that
program
up there?
improvement? Yeah, it's on there. Just the differences between last year and this year.
Oh, okay. Right up here. There's not a really significant difference between these 2 years, but if you look at it, because there's another slide that shows you from 2019 to 2024, you see pretty significant differences. So typically, program improvement is something new. Not typically, that's what it is. It's when we're introducing something new. So there have been years, even prior to 2019, where that budget was $400,000 when we introduced middle school STEM. But since 2019-20, it's been in about the $200,000 range, except for the pandemic year. You see how much it dropped then. So we're in that range. I can remind everybody because it's not listed here specifically, what we have going on this year for program improvement. And that was a family and consumer science, a new course there, department, that's their department, housing and interior design 2. So that came out to be a total cost of $4,960. Then we had the Penridge High School Health and PE courses, civil service and military fitness, that's 2. And then we had the wellness emergency care. Right, they're the ones that went through approvals. And we also had unified physical education. So they were the new courses. Within that budget is also the estimated course for middle school science, but we're still piloting. That may or may not be in that budget. We haven't come to a conclusion yet. But they would be program improvement costs for this year.
So most of those are decided in the previous year and then implemented in the next year, so you know
Correct.
what's ahead.
We
Yeah.
get the
You can see
budget
why the
for the
variance is
year.
there. That makes a lot more sense.
So those are all presentations that would have happened at curriculum?
Yes.
Right.
That's why
Yep.
2021 was so low.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
There's things that had to not do it.
Mr. Russell, did you?
Yeah, just two things, sorry. Why was the budget so high in 2019, 2020? Did you say that?
So that was actually, I believe that was the implementation cost for the elementary RELA program, the Reading Language Arts. That was when we brought in Making Meaning Being a Writer to the elementary level. So
And then was it 2021-22, was that actually budgeted or was that the actual? We actually
No, they're
budgeted for that
actuals.
amount? So that's
They're
actual.
actuals.
So
That's
that-
how much it costs to
It should say-
implement
So
that.
maybe
Yeah,
it
they
could
should
say,
say
it might be,
actual. Yeah.
as opposed to saying budget across there, since we already know what the actuals were, it would be more relevant to say
Mhm.
actuals. Because again, comparing it to the budget is kind of irrelevant at some point.
Well, it does show you why the variation is there,
But-
but it
yeah.
should say actuals.
Yeah.
'Cause it-
right, yeah.
Mhm.
And if we implement a lot of stuff
That-
this year, it's gonna cost a lot next year in that budget, so
That
that's.
bottom line should be the overall cost, like you're saying, the actuals of what was spent.
Yeah, you just don't need the word budget.
Right, yes, that's good. You do have actuals then.
So then we get into my office, and the Assistant Superintendent for Elementary Education. In that budget comparison, as I mentioned, we're going from 167,550 to 154. And on the left are the reasons for the increases and the reasons for the decreases on the right. Kindergarten Carnival, as you know, has been a huge hit over the last 2 years. We did not plan any money to spend for that. So we're finally putting a line item in that will help us to attribute to the supplies needed for the Kindergarten Carnival. Our kindergarten orientation bus safety, which is we bring all the kindergarten students in, we give them a bus ride, we tell them, the bus safety features and all, and that's for all 7 elementary schools. ClassLink is our contribution to the tech department in regards to for the to go into all the apps. I'm trying to think. I'm sorry.
Oh, the key.
Yeah, to go into where all the applications.
PSDE, yeah.
So that's our contribution. Grammarly, this is a technology piece that we use. That's an exact amount of what we've been quoted in regards to what the price will cost us for next year. Ongoing professional development, the Making Meaning supplies, and training and meeting refreshments are all in there. Our decrease in this coming year is Respondus, just went down by $1,000. Linkit, I take personal satisfaction in this one. I've reduced it a little bit, working with the numbers with Linkit and what we're using as part of the program. So we were able to reduce our overall Linkit cost about $6,000 at the elementary level. Atlas is a difference of $500. That's a 3-year license that we pay for Atlas, where all our curriculum documents are memorialized. So in doing so, we were able to negotiate and bring the cost down somewhat, because our professional development piece to that system is now beyond what we need anymore. So we're able to just reduce those costs. As I mentioned, PAE-TEP you'll see next year, that increase will go back in, both my budget and Dr. Shine's, about $31,000 to $32,000. And then our K-12 in-service materials, we did reduce by $50 this next year.
And similar secondary, these really start out at 0. We just add in the cost for the software licenses. We have some increases at the secondary level. They're very similar to elementary. The software licenses on the increases, they've gone up slightly. For Canvas, Canvas is our learning management system. That's what all the teachers at the secondary level use for their instruction. Our s'mores went up $5. Didn't have to note that one, but we did. And ClassLink is what Tony was talking about, and we split that cost. Office supplies went up a bit because costs have gone up. Our decrease is similar. Our Grammarly subscription, we split that, Tony and I, so that went down $6,500. Lincoln, thanks to Tony, because he is the one who should take credit for that, because he did it. We also went down $5,500. We're just not using everything that we used last year because we didn't see the need for that. And Atlas is what you know that we house our curriculum in, and that was a $500 decrease. So we're down about $9,500.
And cyber is cyber school enrollments?
This side, that's Penridge side,
Okay.
and that's paid through the ESSERS grant. So that's not really affecting my budget this year, but it won't.
Eventually.
When will?
Eventually, it's
It will
gonna
go
go back,
back.
so we
It's
need to
gonna
show
go
that.
Yeah, when is
So
it?
this is the final year
This is the
coming up
final
that we
year.
can use ESSERS 3 for our cyber learning for both elementary and secondary. It's kind of odd to look at it a little bit because this runs through obviously June 30th, the grant runs through September 30th of 2024. So what we're using this next school year, in the 23-24 school year, we'll be able to pay for using ESSER, such as the cyber learning and some other, like some of the camp supplies and everything. But we'll be able to use that funding for both this summer still and next summer because of that extension into September 30th.
Do you have a projection of how much for the whole school budget ESSER is paying for now is gonna be on our
Yeah.
tab next year?
That would be,
You wanna share
that
that?
actually would be a good thing.
Yeah, it's.
Give me a ballpark.
It won't be terribly bad as there are some things that will go away. There are some few things that need to be worked into the budget.
Sure.
There are some things like we talked about that are already in the general fund budget that we left there, so we didn't have the cliff to fall
Right.
off of,
Smart.
which is allowing us to then have funds to move over to capital at the end of the year. So we really tried to be smart about the ESSERs. And we looked at it, it was already in the budget and we could use ESSERs for it, we left it there. If it was something that we know, some things that are with ESSERs will go away, and some things that will stay that we'll have to pick up. But it's not gonna be $2.5 million or anything
Okay.
like that, it's gonna be a few things here or there.
So did money from ESSER pay for things now that at the end of the year the surplus went to capital?
Yes. There's a little bit.
Yeah.
Now,
Well, that's good, I think,
Such
in
as
some
the
ways,
cyber.
right?
such as the
Cyber
cyber,
is one of the-
and you'll see when Summers does her presentation, the charter school numbers have come back down. And the
Yes.
cyber money in here that we're using ESSERS for is actually saving us money from kids going to cyber charter schools. So it's really,
Wait,
though they went, if you remember when COVID hit, they went up. And now they've worked back down, so.
yes, that's good.
So other items under the 500 category are the traveling for, it says traveling teachers mileage. That's our coaches and other expenses that teachers may travel from building to building.
The shared teachers.
The
from
shared
high school
teachers
to
from-
middle school.
The high school, the phys ed teachers that travel,
But
those
they
are
don't
the
need
things.
instructional coaches now.
Instructional coaches. And then no, not coaches, you're right. And then under supplies, as you can see, Alice, online training, that is to be paid through Title IV. As part of Title IV, one of the items that we have to include is something, a funding for the health and safety of students, and this falls under that category. So that's what we've been charging Alice to. Again, the kindergarten and carnival supplies, as I mentioned, and then the summer camp supplies, again, being funded by ESSERS at this time. And then the Grammarly subscription, which Dr. Scheid referred to, that we split between the two budgets. We have our ASL summer camp fees for field trips, that is also paid through ESSERS right now. And then our summer school supplies for elementary school as well is being paid through for ESSERS. And then, so on the 500 series, under the 2260 series in the 500 category, we have coaches travel for secondary at $1,500. The other one you saw was elementary. And then we have supplies that we order. A lot of this through Title II funds. But as you can see, Linkit, we're paying $58,000 this year. Atlas 23, and that's a 3-year contract for that $23,000. Canvas, which Dr. Shai referred to for the secondary level, along with ClassLink, which goes to the PSD Key, our typing club, the SMORE newsletter that they use for communication, and then ongoing professional development. And then we have instructional staff development, secondary staff professional development using Title II funds. Our elementary staff travel, as we referred to earlier, is being paid out of this series, and our kindergarten orientation bus safety travel. Under supplies, as you can see, that we have materials for just K-12 in-service and then professional development, along with the PA ETEP custom forms. Because we do alternative opportunities for teachers to engage with their process for the evaluation process, they can go in and do peer coaching with another teacher, and there's also admin coaching. So this is a custom form that we built to fit our style, what we do as an alternative type of evaluation. So that's what the $3,500 for. That's an annual fee. Secondary meetings and workshops, and then other objects. We have our Act 93 memberships and staff development fees. And then to keep going, we have the Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Ed, Act 93, our training development funds for both secondary and elementary, additional mileage for both myself and Kathy throughout the year, and then supplies, we have office supplies for both elementary and secondary. We do purchase the license for SurveyMonkey annually, and then the tech supplies and fees, just nominal fee of $100, just in case we need additional items to support.
What's the SurveyMonkey?
SurveyMonkey is an online web-based feature that you can create surveys within the system itself, and then you can share a link, and then people can complete surveys through that. Like we do our staff development need survey using SurveyMonkey.
Okay.
We did our Title I Family Engagement Night. We used SurveyMonkey to push out a survey to get feedback about the night.
So it's just you use with staff?
It's generally used with staff and parents in that way, yes. This isn't something for kids. This is just in-house in our office.
Okay.
It's not used for teachers, it's just coming out of us.
Isn't that available online? Like anybody can do a survey?
Not, you
I mean,
can,
yeah.
it's not free anymore. It used to
Here's
be.
the cost.
Yeah, it used to be free
It used
for
to be
a
free.
number of years.
Yep.
And then they finally said, we're gonna make a profit off of this.
You need to be.
And then non-certified staff training. This is for our paraprofessionals who are part of EL, Title I, and any other non-special ed paraprofessionals that we support trainings for throughout the year. We have a stipend that we can bring them in and provide support for them in professional development. And again, there's the overall budgets compared from last year to this year, and we're down just over $61,000 of a negative 10%, 10.5%.
And is that the budget or the actual for? Or is it, that's
Those
just the
are
budget?
These budget
Those-
items
yeah,
add up
yeah,
to the actuals of what we expect.
The one thing too we talked about was when the ESSERS funds stop coming in, since our budgets are primarily based upon expense budget, right? So the expenses are still there. It's not gonna be a big drop on that. It'll just be where the funding comes from, right?
Correct.
All right.
So that'll come back from the general fund.
But
Like
when
Mr.
we
Goldberg
look at our
said, we
budget,
didn't-
it'll be consistent because it's in there.
Correct, that's why I haven't taken it,
Yeah.
we haven't taken it out of our budget lines,
Right.
because we didn't want it to look like all of a
Right.
sudden we're going down $150,000 or, whatever the example is, and then come back next year and be like, you're like, why is there a 100% increase?
Right.
I mean, there are some new things, like, there's the expansion of the cyber program, which really is a good thing because it's saving us money out from the general fund. That'll have to come back into the general fund. There's also the summer school program, which we vastly expanded because there's so much of that money that's supposed to be used for learning loss and continued helping them come back from the COVID and so for the pandemic and so forth, and make those strides to make up those losses and so forth. So there'll be, decisions about how robust do we let that summer program? Do we keep it there, or do we roll that back some? If we keep it to where we have it now, yes, those costs will have to be picked up by the general fund. That's something that we didn't have that's robust before, as we do now. So there are some things like that, some decisions that will have to be made from an academic standpoint about where we go from here once all that money goes away.
All right.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
On to the pupil services budget.
Sean, can I still get an approximate number or something about that impact next year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a range.
Yeah.
There are a lot of big decisions that need to.
Moving on to pupil services.
Yeah, Jen's working on
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
She's taking over.
I was.
Okay, I am here tonight to present the pupil services budget for the 23-24 school year. What I wanted to do is just go through some data regarding some numbers. So, and we just talked about this. So as far as students attending charter schools or charter cyber schools, say that 10 times fast. You'll see the decrease. So for this school year, we have 127 students that are attending. You'll see the big jump, which was during the COVID year, the 2021 school year. So students are continuing to come back, whether they're coming back into our schools or they're utilizing our cyber program. So that is great to see, and you'll see a decrease in costs for that as we go through that part of the budget. As far as students attending alternative education placements, that has stayed the same. You'll see though, over the 5 years, we've gone from 26 to 5, which is a nice decrease. And I think for that reason, we're being more proactive. When it comes to those pieces, I think that we're asking really good questions as far as the why behind things are happening and how we can support students. So that is something that, it is good to see over that 5-year span.
Was there, just like other increase of even whether if it was like personnel or anything like that you think added to that? Because that is a huge decrease over 5 years.
I think I do. I believe that, personnel and also just professional development, on understanding how to, I think engagement is a really big piece too, engaging our students. Our students are more engaged. When students are more engaged, they're less likely to have, discipline needs. So I feel that that's an area as well that we really have improved on over the last 5 years.
What is under that category?
Alternative?
Yeah.
So this would be students that are, if there is some type of discipline and they're referred out to. So these are not special education placements.
Mostly discipline, okay.
So our next set of numbers, these are students attending out-of-district placements. So these are special education students attending out-of-district placements that we have agreed upon. You'll see from 2018 to 19, we're at 48, and we are now at 28. So we've had a decrease of 20 students over a 5-year span. That is, I think, again, attributed to the programs that we're bringing back in-house that we're supporting students within our district. Again, it's also the professional development, asking really good questions, and really working as a team. So that is something that we, another piece I will say about this too is that we continue to have really good relationships with our out-of-district placements, with our schools that we work with out-of-district, continuing to be in contact with them to talk with them about how our students are doing and what's benefiting them. So we're learning from these experiences as well. As far as the And one other piece I wanted to share as well, for the out-of-district placements, those 28 students are all secondary students, so we have no students currently at the elementary level, kindergarten through 5th grade, that are attending any out-of-district placement at this time.
Makes sense.
So in some ways, in looking at this, it doesn't mean that the students don't need those additional services, it's just that we're providing them in-house.
Yeah, providing them in-house. And then but we also have some students that we identify that we can't provide that in-house, and that's why, we're looking at these out-of-district placements for them. And then you'll see the IU placements. You'll see over the 5-year span, we've gone from 50 students to this year, we have 28 students attending our IU placements. A large chunk of these students are our 18 to 21-year-old students. So this is transition programs that the IU does beautifully, and we have our students that benefit from the program. The other, we also have our multiple disability students that also are being serviced through our IU programs, but what's wonderful is that we still have those classrooms within our district. So even though they're IU classrooms, they're within Pennbridge schools, so they really still are very much part of our community, but continue to be serviced by our IU personnel. So as far as looking at budget pressures, you'll see that obviously costs are increasing everywhere, and where we see and you'll see within the budget is just those transition services. So those students 18 to 21, those costs continue to increase. We continue to have more students that need those supports. And they're really important supports for our kids to be successful once they do graduate and they leave us at 21.
Is that mandated by the feds, by the state government or the federal government?
Well, so by IDEA, they have to, we have to provide supports for them up until 21 years of age. Yeah.
No, I understand. I'm just.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that a state mandate or a federal mandate?
IDEA is federal.
That's federal. Yeah, federal.
Yeah.
Federal.
That we offer it.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
Yep. And parents can decide whether or not they want to participate, but we tend to encourage them to.
That's the WOW program.
It is.
That's one of them.
It is
Yeah.
a WOW program,
Yeah.
but a few other programs that we have as well, around the county. And then obviously our students with more significant mental health needs, we've had to utilize out-of-district placements for them, to provide those supports, and that's something we're continuing to watch and keep an eye on. So I wanted to give you a budget history. I took my notes from Mr. Russell to make sure that I use actual next time instead of budget. So I started to change it back there during the presentation, but I can't do this now. So 1920, 2021, and 21-22 are all actuals, so that you understand. And then 22-23 is the budget that was proposed for last year, and then 23-24, that's what we're proposing for next school year. So you will see a slight increase of $206,000, which is 1.9% increase. I will talk through that as far as where you see that within our budget as I go through the different sections of the budget moving forward. So overview of budget, so these are the different areas that Pupil Services covers within, so we have 7 budget series that fall under us. Like I said, I'm going to review each one and explain what's a part of each portion of this budget, and then explain where the differences in costs. So this is the one that we talked about, the 11-10 series. This is our regular education. So this is the 4-year history here, and you can see the decrease of $85,000. So this is our charter schools and our charter school students. So you see that we are going to be proposing just over $1 million, but you'll see the $85,000 decrease just because of the amount of students that we have. There's a decrease in students there. So we will be saving that cost, for next school year. Special education, so the 1200 series, this is where, these are all the different areas that fall under special education when it comes to this area of the budget. Now, this is obviously the largest series in the Pupil Services budget and the largest cost. You'll see that for the 23-24 proposed, it's an increase of $285,000. And this really just comes from the increase of costs for programs, the increase of services for students. So that's where you're going to see most of the cost. You'll see when you go back, when you look at the 2021 to 21-22, where there was that decrease. That's when we brought back the IU program. So we brought 3 classrooms back just during that school year, which did save us quite a bit of money. So like I said, for upcoming this school year, that we will see a little bit of an increase, but really that's just due to the cost of services for our students and what they need.
So the 10 to 7 was primarily just removing masks?
I mean, from what I was able to gather, just from doing the research, I know because that was a big year where we brought back 3 classrooms and I believe at least 15 students,
Big saving.
which was a big save for us, yes. The next component, this is the 1400 series, so this is homebound travel. You'll see a slight increase, a $200 increase for next school year, just because we do have a higher level of students on homebound at this time, whether it's from surgery or sickness or things like that. So that's just a tiny piece that we made as far as a change for next year for homebound. Alternative education, this is the 1400 series. So this is an existent budget series that had been managed by the high school that moved into the People Services budget last school year. This budget covers all of our mental health support programs at the high school, our Family Foundation partnership, students that might need like a partial hospitalization program that we pay the educational costs for, and also at our slots at CSF Bucksmont for alternative education. So those are where those costs come from. So you'll see, from this year to next year, we're not proposing any type of change. The next section, the 2100 series, this is for guidance counselors, psychologists, social workers, student accounting. This is really books, materials, protocols for our psychologists. They can be quite expensive. So these are all the different supports that they need in order to do their jobs. So you'll see there's just a slight increase of $500 from the budget from this year to the proposed for next year. And again, like I said, these are just travel, supplies, books for this group.
And how many social workers again do we have within the district?
We have 3.
Is it possible to get a total spend on what we put into mental health from people and supplies and all different budgets? I think it carries over to other ones. Just a historical one in the last 5 years. Just to understand what our effort is.
Well,
I know it's not just people.
but even when you think about people, like what percentage of a guidance counselor is, right? Like it's
I know it's
to be
not
able to
an easy
estimate
thing,
that.
that's
So
why I'm asking the question. I don't know it's how detailed we could go.
we can look at categories, and as long as we define the categories, so you know what's in them. Okay.
No, I know it's
Our next section is legal fees. So this is different from the legal settlements under the special education section, which is under the special education section. The legal settlements are the amount of money that we have put aside for students that are on different agreements. This series is for the direct legal fees we pay for pool counsel and for the legal support that we receive in specific cases. So you'll see a small increase here due to the number of students that we are either extending or transitioning off of settlements at this time. Whenever that happens, we do have some more attorney support to identify, what we want to do as far as next steps and where we want to go. So you'll see a slight increase in that for the next school year. And then for health services, this is the 2400 series. This really is just health supplies coming from the school nurse, everything from AEDs to the different supplies that they have. And again, we're not seeing an increase in budget for next school year, so we're going to keep that amount at $22,000 for this coming school year.
Are we looking at how much supplies are actually left at the end of the year? Because my understanding was that we were having a large surplus of supplies at the end of the year that were then disposed of, and then we would buy new supplies the next year. And I just want to
You're talking specific to health?
Like, are you, that's like when you go to the nurse and stuff, like those kinds of supplies and things?
I think it depends. depends on the type of supply. I think there's some that they may have to discard after a year. But
Yeah, like
other
we're talking like Band-Aids, bandages, like things that you would think don't have necessarily an expiration.
Yeah, I mean, I know we will typically bring that to the summer program. We'll use that in the summer program as well, so we don't have to buy additional supplies for the summer program. But yeah, I don't see us discarding it. I think we hold on to as much as we can. I know it's used quite a bit at the elementary level. But yeah, I mean, I don't believe that we're discarding them if they don't need to be discarded. So then, this is then just a breakdown of all the different areas of the People Services budget. The actuals from the 2021-2022 school year. You'll see the 22-23 proposed budget, or the budget for this school year. You'll see the proposed for next school year, which, like I had said earlier, there will be an increase of $206,000 for this coming school year for People Services.
I would agree with Jonathan, though. I would still like to see an estimate of whether you're gonna hit the budget for this year, this far into it. I think, and I know each one's different, and one that's project-based, I get that, but
Yeah.
it's always helpful to know.
Yeah, the overall budget, is within, at 9 months, the overall budget is within 0.5% of where it was last year. And last year, we ended up 1.87% under budget. So we're very close to where
That's
we were
good.
running last
Should've
year.
said
And
that earlier.
that's the entire budget, everything, not broken down, for every department. I look at it globally every month,
You did, okay.
and,
That was Susan. Thank you.
So then, this is, some of the exciting pieces of kind of where we're going next, moving forward as far as People Services and how we continue to support kids. And obviously, we're always talking about how to keep our kids within Penridge and how we continue to provide inclusive opportunities for our students. So for this coming school year, we are proposing that to have 3 new autistic support teachers support us next year. And that's just due to caseload, due to the amount of students that are continuing to come into the district. By law, you can't have more than 8 students on a caseload for a kiddo with autism that has like a supplemental level of support that's usually more than an hour of support at one time. So, as our numbers increase, we need the support. And as our program grows, we need to then kind of grow with the program as we provide more support at each level. Along with that, we're also asking for a 0.5 speech therapist as well, just because this area of need for our students on the spectrum, speech therapy is a really big piece, and we want to make sure that we have the ability to support those students in their speech therapy needs, both within the classroom and then, for some of our kids even in the community, depending on what supports they need.
So adding this is based on the requirement that we
It is,
have
yeah,
to.
it is.
Do we track how many kids or no?
I can get you the number on
Yeah.
how many kids that we have, yeah,
Just-
absolutely. I will
How
say that
many
our,
do we have now? How many teachers?
I can tell you we have 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. We have 15 autistic support teachers
Okay.
from K to 12. And what's
You're going to go to
and we're
18?
we're continuing to, at the elementary, and the one other piece I will say is that we support students with autism in all of our buildings, all 11 buildings, regardless of where they are. We just have some students that need a higher level of need, which is where we support, which is where we bring in these additional supports for students. So yeah. And should that just be, you can see the costs of what this looks like as far as autistic support, classroom and 2 teaching assistants with each class. So, and then just to kind of put it in perspective a little bit, if you were to look at, an out-of-district placement for a student with similar needs, a teacher and 2 TAs would be equivalent to maybe 2.3, 2.4 students as far as what we would provide in a private placement. So obviously, we're able to support a lot more within district when we're bringing in these teachers, and it just continues to build the community and the culture of Penridge, I believe.
And that's already within, this number, 635,000 is already in the budget.
Yes.
Sean's writing a check. You're writing a check.
Yeah, these are the new positions we've shown as part of the finance budget.
Any questions?
Yeah. It's not really a budget question, but going back to the slide that had the alternative ed numbers,
Yeah,
placements,
slide, is that 11?
It was the actual number, there it is, it's,
11.
slide 2. The students attending alternative ed placements, I mean, it has really dramatically decreased. I was just wondering, when you said that, what kind of follow-up is there with, you know, the students, just following them as they come back into the classrooms and following the teachers that, you know, have them come back in
Yeah.
there, making sure that that is going smoothly. So what do you do in those cases?
So when a student returns from an alternative placement, there obviously is a reentry meeting. And before that, we've spoken with the teachers that have been working with the students in the alternative ed placement just to see what type of supports they need, how they're doing, and then identifying whether or not they're ready to return. That's also another question that we typically will talk through with them. So we'll do that reentry meeting, and then once the students return, they're in their classes. And a part of that reentry meeting, we have a teacher, we have a house principal, and then from there they continue to just check in with the student, see how they're doing, you know, maybe some additional supports from the guidance counselor. It really just depends on what the student was struggling with and what they need when they come back in. So that's typically what the level of support will look like, you know, for a student that's returning from an alternative ed placement.
And then for the teachers, do they
Yeah.
have supports associated as well?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the big piece really begins with making sure the teachers understand what the students were working on when they were in alternative placement, and providing them just with the background of that student. And then they're always available for, you know, supports, whether it's through an instructional coach. Usually it's a house principal, because there might be some discipline component, the behavioral piece involved, and then being able to be, you know, in contact with them.
How many students do we have in the autistic program?
The autistic support program?
Yeah.
I would have to let you know, if we have 15 teachers, and we have 8 kids to a class. That's 120 kids, maybe a few less, because some of our classes don't have the full 8, but then we have other classes that might have 10 or 11 to the itinerant level.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that I'm very impressed with, over the years, how much you brought back into the school. And I'd love to know about how much you've saved the taxpayers with all the, bringing all this stuff back and saving money. It's impressive. It really keeps your budget under control. So it's an amazing accomplishment, I think, for the past 5 years. I'd love to know approximately how many millions of dollars you saved the school.
Thank you, Mrs. Summers.
Thank you.
Your favorite time of the night, Mr. Dalton?
Okay. If you remember last month, we looked at the general fund budget, in the first run through, and we had a balanced budget. We have made some changes since that meeting. The tech school budget was passed by our board, so we reacted to that number and built that number into this budget, and one or two other numbers, and then also have changed our revenue side in order to match that. So again, we're coming to you in April with a balanced budget, and I will walk through those changes with you. I'm not going to go through all 45 slides like we did last month. This is a much pared down version compared to what we did last month, but you still have last month this to look back on, but this presentation is just building on that, showing you the changes. There are a few slides in here that are the same that you've seen before, that are just in here again for your reference. But so we'll try to just work through this with you. So our goals for tonight, and then this second budget presentation of the year, I usually just give you a update on where we're at with our district capital project fund balance, show you the amounts that have been planned out over the next few years by our facilities team. Also show you where we're at with debt service. After our last refinancing, remember last year we saw a different schedule that looked much better than it had before, so we'll show you that. Give you an update on where we're at with 23-24 budget, and then just talk about where we go from April forward with the budget and what the steps that we have to take. So the capital projects funding, if you see there, coming out of the audit, we had about $20 million at June 30th, 2022, but the summer of 2022 still had about almost $7 million of commitments left to be spent from that $20 million. So really looking forward to the 2023 summer, we're starting with $13.5 million. Our estimate that we use each year is roughly $2 million coming over from capital. That's a very conservative estimate coming over from the general fund to capital at June 30, 2023. During the summer of 2023, we have committed to $11.5 million worth of projects through both bid projects and decent projects with SiteLogic. Now that is $11.5 million is what the number is now. As you guys know, as we go through summer projects, the only changes there are additions, right? Costs only go up, things get found in bid projects that cost us change orders and so forth, but at this point, $11.5 million. Carry that over to the next year, roughly $3.9 million. We're estimating $3 million from the capital or from the general fund budget, and then in the 24-25 year is when the first amount of money from the debt drop-off becomes available. So I'm saying another $6 million there, breaking it apart so you can see it. Then for 2024, the estimate is about $12 million in cost of projects. Now, those are projects that we're working on now with SiteLogic, as you know, and they're out starting to put together numbers and so forth and budgets, things like that. My $12 million is high, I think, because when we asked them to stay 9 to 10 million, when all said and done, another year out till things are bid and so forth, I left the higher number in here for this scenario. So that leaves about $800,000 at the end of that year. Go forward into the next year, another 3, another 6 coming over, and if you remember, we had to push projects from 24 because of how much the cost went up. So now I've worked that number up to about 7 million. It was about 2 to 3 million with all those projects that we had to push. Now the estimate is about 7 million for that year. So after that, that would leave us about 2.7 million, and then for the 26-27 year, again, another 3 million, another 6 million. And that year is really where we see that fall off of projects that are planned. We do have those, thoughts about another kitchen project and so forth, but that's really where the fall off comes. At this point, we need to continue with our planning and see what the projects are. So at that point, about 9.3 million. So these are
So you
conservative.
expect that to go up a lot, so
That 2.3 million, I
Yeah.
would expect that, yes, that would go up.
so what's in the 2025 and 2026 then? Or
The
what's being
7
pushed?
The 7.1 million is the list of projects that, the last time SiteLogic was here, we had split the list.
Big spreadsheet.
That was everything.
In the
Colored
spreadsheet. And that group that we pulled off and said, Mr. Harper said, okay, these can wait, these are the most important. So the most important were going in summer 2024. The ones that could wait, we put over into the summer 2025.
Where
So
does the South Auditorium fall into this?
South Auditorium is not identified there yet.
Okay,
Currently in there.
that's a good question.
None of the big
None of the
ticket
big
items that we
ticket-
talked about are in there.
The lighting is not in there yet.
Yeah,
South
that's-
Auditorium is not in there yet.
Hmm.
So you're saying we have to wait till when for the
Yeah,
South Auditorium?
that would be 27 or later, you're saying?
Yeah.
That's a pretty long time.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought we were.
Especially if we're
I thought
carrying
we were
big
prioritizing
surpluses.
that
In some
over,
instances.
some of these
Here,
modernizing the kitchen projects.
what was that? Which ones?
I thought we were prioritizing that over modernizing some of the kitchen projects.
Some of them need, some of them need it, I know
Some of
that,
them,
but I
yeah.
don't know how many
Everything else-
kitchens are.
Yeah, everything out through the summer of 2025 is what has already been prioritized by the board on,
Yeah.
you know,
But then you're
Through the
anticipating
project.
almost a 3 million surplus that you're moving over to the next year.
That's
Is
the
that
number
right?
we use for that.
No, I mean, you're ending up with 2.69 at the end.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, it's,
But the South was, what was gonna be
that was a lot more.
5 million or something?
Yeah. And
No, I
that's not
remember
in
the
26
conversation
or-
about prioritizing them.
No, I
I just
understand.
thought maybe it would,
but we got pushed back at least a year because of
Mhm.
the cost that
Cost
risen so much
Yeah.
that we have had to move, you know, a whole year's worth of project
Storage
to
tank.
2025.
yeah,
And fuel storage tank failed,
we're still spending.
so we've reacted to some things that have come up, and there will be more that come up between now and then that we have to react to. It's just,
No, I understand that.
with 11 school buildings, 13 total buildings, there's things that happen that have to be taken care of. But that's a snapshot of what it looks like at this point. Okay?
And where South goes for their like musicals and chorus concerts, they do theirs where right now?
They are
have to do a smaller version in a smaller facility, I think.
In their the school.
correct.
Right.
They do their show at their, and then they've done different things with concerts. They've done them in theirs. They've gone other places. They've done them in the gym. They did one outside.
Mhm.
They've been creative to try to get larger spaces.
So can we, at the next facilities meeting, revisit the priority list? Because I really think that that's something that needs to be prioritized sooner.
Sure.
Yeah.
The
We
color
don't-
I
coded
think we
sheet
should
back.
discuss it. I didn't think it would be 4 years out, so we were talking about.
Yeah, it's already been a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it should be, every school should be
Right.
the same, so I would agree.
That would be an example of sometimes you have to, there's things you have to do. And that's been a long time coming, so.
Shouldn't have happened.
We can bring that.
Precisely.
We'll send it in advance and then talk about it at the next
Okay.
facility.
Yeah, it's a good
Sure.
question.
May 3rd was the last presentation that we had last year, where they were
And
showing
another-
the South.
Another thing to again keep in
Yeah.
mind is we have that
Yes.
huge Peasers money account with the Peasers money that we are not utilizing and won't utilize. And again, that preceded Sean's time here, and he said he wouldn't have created it in the first place. It was something that was from a prior business manager. But, you know, you wouldn't use that for a recurring cost. So we just are basically hoarding taxpayer dollars in an account that we'll never use, so we should move that into capital, and that money can be used to prioritize some of these things that are important in a more timely fashion.
It's a lot of money, what are we doing? I know you've answered this before, but it's a valid question.
Yeah, it's
It's a lot of
about
money.
$4 million. It is part of our total fund balances. It helps us, right now with cash flow. It helps us, it generates interest revenue. It helps us balance the budget with interest revenue. It also helps us maintain our bond issue rating. You know, we moved up a step in bond issue rating. One of the things that the bond issue rating companies look at is your fund balances, whether you're maintaining them or not. So there are some things it does positively for the districts by carrying it as fund balance.
But it's not in there.
It is not in there.
It's
no.
not, it's a
It's
separate,
different from
okay,
capital.
that's right, I
Yeah,
just wanna
it
make
is
sure.
not in there.
But we're using it, is it coming down or is it staying the
No,
same?
we're not using it, it's just sitting in the account, doing nothing.
I understand the interest, it's a little bit better this year than it has been in the past few years, that's for sure. But it's still not, that alone is not a
We
good
have not
use of the
added to,
money.
we have not added to that amount since my arrival. So,
And it's $4 million.
yeah, roughly 4.
So
So the risk is the bond rating?
But we're not the only time your bond rating matters is when you're borrowing money, which
Well-
we're not doing, so.
No, they can change your bond rating at any time. They review districts' bond
Right,
ratings.
but they're not gonna
every
do that
year.
over us spending $4 million on you, right?
They review bond ratings every
That's
year,
fine.
they look at things, that's
I
that's part of
understand
that
that too,
process.
but it's still a lot of money just sitting.
Exactly.
It's still a lot of money just sitting there. Is that, do most districts do that? Do they have this type of?
Most just, there are,
It just seems
you
strange.
saw you saw the reports come out from the Department of Auditor General about fund balances.
Mhm.
And we were not named as one of the districts that have what they consider to be excessive fund balances. We are not excessive in our fund balance. We have our 8% in our unreserved fund balance. We have an active working capital project fund that we work from. We have, and then we have the reserve, the PSERS. It's not, we are not being pointed out or singled out.
That's being too much.
As-
Are we
as
in the
having-
higher end or the
Exactly.
lower?
Isn't 8 the max though? It's 5 to 8, right?
It's for unreserved fund balances, the max is 8%.
Okay, how much are we?
We're 8% for our unreserved fund balance.
So right at the top.
I don't know actually.
And that's unreserved, so then we have all these other categories of reserved on top of it, because as long as you basically tag it for something, which is what some of the other districts do, right, to get around that so they can hold on to more than 8%, is, you know,
that true?
kind of tag it for different things in different accounts above that, beyond
Well,
8%.
the size of the school
Is that-
district also.
Well, this is a, for instance, of money that you can, right,
Right.
attribute
that?
specific to capital.
Right,
Right, this isn't trying to skirt anything,
No,
this is
no,
saying
no, and this is
we
we're
don't
gonna
wanna
use
borrow
this.
money, and so we're right. Right, so this is a good example of where we've placed lots of money over the last.
And you usually
years
have a
too.
little surplus at the end of the year, which is good.
Do you think anybody would answer the question if you asked, like, theoretically, what could you use from this? If our balance changed by X amount, would that affect us? And then we could decide maybe
The whole thing,
if it would be available to us.
it helps to pay for something that we need. That's, I mean, it's
That's
just
what
to
I'm
use it
thinking about,
to
yeah.
throw it away.
$4 million to cap from one fund balance to another fund balance is not going to jeopardize our credit rating.
I
mean,
can't,
think
we
it's a
can't
good-
answer
I don't
that.
know,
I
I
mean,
think that's a question I would
that
just,
Sean
It's
would-
not.
I mean,
Well,
I
we
mean-
don't know that. I mean, I
So
would
we'll
wanna
bring,
discuss it.
we'll bring the facilities priorities as well as funds available for a discussion in May. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
Is that what I, right, okay.
and more understanding of our bond rating and how it will be affected.
We'll at least ask some questions. and
Yeah,
see.
I mean,
Right.
it's,
I'm not just moving it around, I'm talking about if you actually spent it
spend it for
to
something the school
do
needs.
the south or whatever
Right,
to
but that's
to
fine, like,
expedite
the
that.
concern is if you start, creating a structural deficit, and that's not what we're talking about doing. In fact, if you used that money for PSERS, you'd be more likely to affect your bond rating because you'd be creating a structural deficit, because you'd be using it for a recurring cost, which we would never do.
Well, that's
So
what I,
that's why it makes no sense to keep it there.
but that's a question that I would like, if you can ask the people that we worked with, I don't know, previously, PNC or
Okay.
Mhm.
Respond.
Okay.
Do we foresee any huge capital projects that are going to impact this thing? That are not?
Huge capital projects, like as far as like building a building or something like that?
No, I know that, but I mean.
Like building an auditorium.
Good building. Well, that's one that's out
That's the
there.
one.
A kitchen.
I mean, the kitchens are
Well, I
important.
mean, there are
Sure.
some larger items on that prioritized list,
Oh,
but,
yeah.
but
We can
between
talk about that.
Mr. Harper's department and SiteLogic working with us,
Yeah.
we feel like we have a list. I mean, obviously,
It
things
is
that
a
are
good
unknown
list.
were unknown, but
We got rid of the
That.
parking lot, so that was.
as well as talking about some big ticket items that we were trying to prioritize that we haven't placed anywhere because of that. And so that's the conversation we need to have.
Definitely.
Yeah. So this next slide's our debt service. You can see fiscal year 2024, principal and interest are about $13 million, and then fiscal year 2025 it drops to about $6.5 million and stays there for about 3 years and then drops again. And by fiscal year 2029, the district is out of debt. We have about $37 million total in outstanding principal at this time. When I started, we had $122 million in outstanding principal.
Wow. That's incredible.
Now, and I'll just say this, just to say it, if you wanted to build Southland Auditorium next year or 2 years from now and start the process, you could borrow money and pay for it with borrow money. You could float a bond issue, and then you would build in debt service. When it drops off in 2025, you would build in debt service to pay that back. You would not run out of, you would not end your debt as fast, and you would also not have as much to transfer to capital projects whenever the debt service drops off. So there is more than one
Wait a
way.
second, why would we hoard away money that we're not gonna use,
No, no,
millions of taxpayer dollars, and then
Hold on,
borrow money and pay
Hold
interest
on,
on it
I'm
on
saying,
the bond?
listen, what I'm saying is, it's gonna cost a lot more than $4 million to build that auditorium.
The last estimate based on the one that we were talking about was about 5 million. I'm sure that's changed with the cost of materials and labor and all of those things, but it's not, we're not talking like,
Last year.
The $4 million that's there won't do it, so it would have to be money come from somewhere else to
right, or we could move priorities around, but regardless, I just think that we shouldn't be
There are-
talking about borrowing
What's
money and
8 or 9.
interest.
So on
Last year.
2030,
The most recent number was 8
no
to 9
debt
million.
now?
So,
Correct.
So that's the end right there.
That's the end.
It's not just sloping down.
correct, comes zero then.
So what, if you look at other districts in the state, are they debt-free? Are they loaded in debt? What's the average? I mean, most businesses don't run debt-free, right? I mean, that's not necessarily a thing you're proud of.
Most school districts don't run debt-free.
Right.
Most of them-
Palisades does.
Well, I mean, I don't, a business typically doesn't run debt-free, so this is the same thing in my life. I mean, it might be part of the equation to look at if we want to move this on.
This is highly unusual.
What?
This slide
This.
is highly
Yes,
unusual.
yes, that's what I was
It's
saying.
wonderfulness.
Especially
Yeah,
for, I
it's-
think, a
if you're-
district
if
of
you're-
our size.
Yeah, it's incredible.
All right, so getting into the budget numbers again, you saw this slide last week. I'm just basically showing you what the Act 1 index affords. It's 4.1% this year. It's about 5.5 mils of taxes. And the impact on the property owner, the median assessed value would be about $175 if the Act 1 index went into place. Next slide, these are the changes in revenue since the last meeting. What we've done is we have an offsetting increase in expenditures of the same amount, and I'll show you that. But we have medical access funding for special education. What we're going to do is those 3 teachers and 6 teacher aides that Mrs. Summers talked about in her budget, we're going to use medical access funding to cover those for at least 1 year, maybe 2 years. Eventually, we'll have to work them into the budget, but since we had the budget balanced, and we're going to try to balance the budget again, we're going to use medical access funding to cover those positions for at least 1 year, maybe 2 years, and then work them into the general fund budget. But
What
also-
is medical access fund?
Medical access money is money that's generated based on services provided to special education students that qualify for medical access.
Who pays for that? Is that from the state?
It's a federal
Federal
fund,
fund,
and it's based on the services that are provided to our kids.
and it lasts, but it doesn't last for,
No, it builds based on the services that you provide to your kids. And we have built up and then you can use those funds for anything special education related. Teachers, aides, so forth. It builds up, we've built up a healthy reserve. There's enough there that we can fund this for a year or two and then work it into the general fund budget. So it's a stepping process to get there. And then the second item that I've increased is interest earning. That was one of the ones that we pointed out last month that we felt that with the interest rates where they're at now and what we think we're gonna get to the end of this year, we can add some more there and still be comfortable. So total revenue changes about $754,000. And then the expenditure changes since last month also total $754,000. 2-item tuition for the tech school added $605,000, and a program improvement for middle school science added $149,000 for that program improvement. So that takes us to the $754,000 that.
So that was also new, the science, what,
Yeah, that
what
was,
is that?
Go ahead.
yeah, that's a new program improvement. There was question about whether we would get to it or not. The decision's been made to try to get that into next year. We didn't pick it up the first budget because there was questions about that. Now, the plan is to do that. And this is the program improvement. That's something that Dr. Scheid talked about, in the program improvement budget, was middle school science that they're gonna work on.
And that's the placeholder, assuming the pilot goes well. That's the pilot that Mr. Danny brought to us last
Yes.
month about the middle school year.
Nice.
Okay. So we're now balanced at $154,662,447. We're up a little bit from last month, and we are now at a 3.45% increase from the 22-23 budget, and last year we were at 3.25% growth. So we're pretty close this year to last year in our budget growth.
So can I ask a question on the revenue side?
Yeah.
If you go back year over year, what's driving most of the increase over revenue? Is it real estate taxes?
Real estate taxes and earned income taxes are two
Okay.
drivers.
So how do we project that going forward as far as new houses being built and I know you monitor that, but also, I guess, earned income tax. Do we have a 5-year view on that?
We have, we get information from the townships about the planned, approved
Yeah.
developments, how many units, estimated values of what they are, and we can then work our way out with those. And we also have the history of our increases in our assessed value, which kind of bounce up and down, but are helpful in, showing us a direction going forward. So really those two things that we work on.
So looking forward, do we see a continued 3%, 4%? Is that what
We're not seeing 3 or 4% growth. I mean, 1% growth in our real estate taxes is pretty good.
It's not going up or
It's not going. It's not going up 3 or 4%. It's 1.2%, or can be 0.75%. In that range. But it is an $80 million number. So 1% of that is significant in budget growth. So.
When's the next time that the Pennsylvania Economic League or something? When's the next
That's
time
one of
that
them.
they'll be doing a review of us?
Our current projections are through 2027, and so we would have to make that determination in terms of, whether we want to do it like a formal review that was done back in 2017 because they've used multiple data points, or whether we just use the Economic League. But we have good data through 2027 because we actually compare that. That includes housing data, and actually for the last 5 years, the actual has outgained what they had proposed it to be, which means theirs is growing even a little faster than they thought it would be. So, which is healthy.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I mean, I would just think that we're talking about passing a $600,000 expense maybe down 2 years from now. Like, we would be responsible for
Yeah, the new positions.
the new positions that you're going to, so it might be a good idea to have them. You're saying we would have to decide to have them?
Right, we would have to
come in?
decide what level of commitment we make in terms of the data they want to pull, because back then they did a full report, because that was coupled with some other conversations that board was having at that time. If you remember that report that was put out,
Yeah, I mean,
about
they are
space usage
usually
and all
very
those types of things. So
accurate with their,
they've been,
predictions.
from an enrollment standpoint and from a housing standpoint, it has been very, very good information for us.
and then do you think about what the projection for, so the Economic League looks at population and those types of things, but what about for us, like this year, we need to add 3 autistic support teachers and 2 TAs with each one of those teachers. Do you look ahead, like, so we're adding these 3 this year or next year? Or do you say, well, after that, we're gonna need even, this many more, or, because again, like that $600,000, we're gonna need to pick up in 2 years, but what if we have a need for 3 more, another $600,000? So do you, and is my question making sense?
It does, and we have conversations, although some of it's if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
That we have built a reputation of strong programs in districts, and parents like that. And so I know that we've had some special ed move-ins specifically because of our programs. It's hard to anticipate how much of that will happen. We do talk about current programs that are outside of the district and when they make sense, right, from a student standpoint, and high enough that from a financial standpoint it makes sense to bring those programs back, like we've done with some of the IU programs over the last 5 years. And so those projections we have, it's a little tougher to anticipate how many new students are going to need in a certain disability category.
Well, you can look at trends nationally.
That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking, like national
We have
or
to assume
even,
it's gonna be
regional. I think people won't move so much, they
Yeah,
might
you
move
have
within
those
our
numbers, Dr.
region.
Bolton?
Yeah,
Since
I
they
don't-
got all,
I've never
Or the
seen them, but I can
13
ask.
districts.
Yeah, in terms of what it looks like across the state or across the county.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
just
know.
look at it.
I don't know.
It's not an option, so we have to add. So-
Well, right,
so
it's
we have-
mandatory, but it just gives me a little anxiety thinking that,
Yeah, 600.
we can build the 600,000 into the budget 2 years, well, I won't be here, but somebody
But
will.
it'll be like,
So
it
you
might be
could-
900 by then.
Right, exactly, so we might be thinking, oh, yeah, we'll build it in, but then we'll get there and we need,
We have some things happening in our general fund budget in the next year, as we know.
yeah,
With the debt's reducing, that's gonna leave us some room
wiggle, okay.
to work these things in. So it's not a dire situation. We have the ability to pick those things up.
And did you already do forgive me, with transportation, remember we didn't buy buses, or we reduced the number of buses. I know I'm jumping from subject to subject, but,
We added the money back into this budget to get us back to where we were before last month.
because that would be another thing that we were kind of,
We didn't took that out and we worked that back into this budget, so.
Same amount, less buses.
An interesting thought process is getting the municipalities that are associated with the school district together and look at land use planning. That'll tell you right away exactly how much land is available for manufacturing, commercial, and also residential. That's gonna be a big factor, and the other factor involved is water and sewer. Those are other issues that we need to be looking at in this general area of Pembridge. Because once you reach capacity, you can really find yourself in a non-growth mode. That happened down in the Bristol area when they were dealing with the city of Philadelphia with the water flooding. They had some problems with
Yeah.
growth. So that, to me, that might be a logical way to go, is just bring all the supervisors together or their general managers and start talking about what your land use plan is.
We
That
do
was
that
part
with
of
our,
that.
with that could be part of the patrimony, so maybe Christine could bring that.
Yeah, there was, I went to one of them, they were talking about new developments and different things, and I'm sure it shows where the increase is coming
Yeah, but
from.
if you look at it from an industrial manufacturing end versus what a housing development does, the impact on the school district from a housing fee is greatly increased versus manufacturing.
Well, you probably have access to all that stuff. don't you?
No, I do
Oh,
not. It's
you
Bucks
don't?
County Planning
No,
Commission.
okay. But I mean, you're involved.
I can get
so,
involved.
yeah. You have a much better
I never
handle
raised
than
my
any of us.
hand, you know that.
Okay, the next slide is the local, state, and federal, total revenues. The local, is up a little bit with the addition to the, interest earnings, that we talked about, and the federal line is up a little bit with the, medical access money, so that's how we get to the 154 million, 662 compared to the 153,908 last month. And this is just the same slide, the real estate tax calculation slide as last month, but we don't, we're balanced, so you can see at the bottom the balance, see where we don't need to raise taxes to balance the budget or and next slide is the object summaries. The changes here from last month are again in the 500 object line total. That's the tuition line item, as went up from 10,599,000 to 11,204,000, and the supply line up from 6,185,000 to 6,334,000. So those are the two changes on that slide from last month. And then just an object summary slide, give 45.42% in salaries, 26.35% in benefits, and then the rest in the other objects. And we are at 7.62% for principal and interest payments, and normally a school district is anywhere from 12 to 14% of their debt would be their debt service. So we're about half of where normal districts are. And then these are the budget drivers. The year this just changed a little bit from the last month. We're now at the total 5.3 million. Changed the number 3, the tuition, and the supplies, number 5. So, and then again, this is the same slide as you saw last month. These are just the total requested positions. The first 3, 4, 10 of them. This is some we talked about tonight. Those are the autistic teachers and the autistic teaching aides and the 0.5 speech therapist. We're also have one computer technician on the list, and Mrs. Miller will talk about that in her budget presentation next month. With the technology department, we have one full-day kindergarten teacher and one full-day kindergarten teaching assistant, and then 0.6 career pathway coordinator, so that's an expansion to a full position for next year.
So we're gonna have a technology meeting? Is that what
She's gonna present her technology budget during her finance.
Oh, all right.
And then the next slide is just the budget timeline. In the meeting here tonight, state's gonna talk to us, send us some information about property tax relief. Then on May 1st, they're gonna certify how much money they have to come out to us. May 2nd is our next finance and budget meeting, budget update meeting. We're balanced at this point. I don't really foresee us needing to make any changes to the budget at this point. We should be able to move into May, past the preliminary budget, proposed budget in May, and then the budget will be available for public inspection. It'll be duly advertised, that's required by the law, and we'll bring it back in June. And in June, you'll have the final vote on the budget, and then we will work with the tax collectors and to have the tax bills printed, and they have to be out they are supposed to be out into taxpayers' hands by the 1st of July.
And just want to say publicly, just in case anyone's got a senior, we will not be doing finance on June 6th. That's Penn Ridge graduation. So they picked that after we had our dates. So we're still working on new dates for June, because June 5th is also a committee night, and it's the tech school graduation. And so we struck out 0 for 2 in June. So we'll do them as early in June as we can, but it will not be the 5th and the 6th.
Right. So that day will change, and then the last date is the final budget adoption, and that's the June 12th meeting, and I don't know if that'll have to change or if that'll stay the same. But the earlier we have our budget meeting or our budget passage in June, the better it is for us to be able to get our tax bills out on time. So that's why we have the meeting so early.
So does the tech school have to do any of that, or is that completely separate?
I'm sorry.
It's a budget, is it? Does that have to, the tech school, do they have a separate process like that, or does it just fall under our, we have to incorporate as just another spending line?
Yeah, their budget has to be passed by the joint
Yes, I
operating
understand
committee
that.
and the sending districts, and it only has to be approved once.
Right.
Whereas the
But there's
school,
no timeline or anything?
it just has to be approved by June 30th.
Right, but do you have a
We don't have to
timeline?
wait, like, we don't have to wait for the May 1st numbers to come from the state, because that funding comes to the sending districts, not to the tech school, so the process is a little bit easier, because our funding isn't coming from those different sources, so.
It's coming from,
Right,
It's coming from us.
right, but my question is,
well, they're us
do you
too.
have do you have a
Yeah.
public process for the tech school, or is it a certain period of time? Like, we have 6 months, right, which is a long
Yeah.
period of time.
The idea is to get it done early enough that we can plan accordingly for our budgets at the sending districts.
But there's no other public comment type thing where?
Right, I think that there should be a public commenting period, because yes, it is our students, it's also our taxpayer money, like I said, the last meeting.
It's definitely.
It's something that we should be, but regardless, I mean, we here in Penridge take a lot of time going over the budget, and when you have an increase of $600,000 over what we budgeted, and we know that our business manager is very good with what he does and very conscientious, I mean, that's something that ought to be talked about. The tuition is one thing, that is a completely uncontrollable fixed cost. You have this many kids going, you owe this much money. You
There
can't
isn't
do anything
tuition.
about
It doesn't-
that.
It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't,
But if
it
anyone.
actually does. There are fixed costs that we can't
It doesn't,
change.
but-
However, there are costs inside of that budget, just like our people here do. You go back in, you find places where you can make adjustments and maybe not have to budget that amount of money. There were some questions when I met with Dr. Bolton to talk about the tech school budget that weren't answered. Some items, some departments that had huge increases. And over,
I don't wanna get
It's
into
not-
I mean, I'm not gonna, I
The
think,
budget literally went down 1% from last year, and if you parse out those other things,
No.
it went up 1.5%.
no,
I
that
mean,
1% is, again,
you
it's a
can
false,
try to-
it's a
The
false.
reality
Wait, wait,
is,
wait.
we were robbing
It's-
Peter to
it's-
pay Paul,
no,
pulling from fund
oh my
balance, creating a
gosh.
structural deficit, we fixed it, you're
If
welcome.
anyone else, any of him, if he came in with a $600,000 increase
It's
and
not-
and
we would
did
be-
that,
we would
we
be
would
looking
discuss
at
it.
that.
It
Well,
should
where I'm
be
still
the same.
confused, where I'm still
No, no,
confused
no,
is
I
last
don't wanna
year,
discuss it, it's
the
done.
same process happened. They came
But it
and
wasn't a
they presented it,
$600,000 increase.
and we didn't have a balanced budget.
Actually,
And
but
Ron,
again,
Ron,
so
this
that's
there was no,
proceeded-
there
this
was
proceeded
if
nothing
other
because
people
this was a
on
could
five-year
have
plan.
point
now.
and
there's-
All I asked
and
was to
maybe
hold
get
Now
on.
there's
point
major
And you didn't want
concerns.
to
It
say
makes
So
that
no
there
sense.
was
That's what it
I'm
cost
sorry,
me
I'm
now.
confused, is the tech school on the agenda, because I don't see it as an agenda.
The tech school is a part of our
I
budget
don't
that
see
we,
it on the
it
agenda.
actually is, it was just here, let me
I just
show
don't
you
understand
the
why.
Cindy, are you,
expenditures for the tech
Are you ready to
school.
move on from this?
So, no,
Because
I'm not
I
ready
think
to
we're
move on,
from
because
the
see,
meeting
this
in
is your
case the chair-
tactic, you shout people down instead of having a point to
Do the
be
same
made.
thing.
Last year, to say that last year, that there was no discussion and no questions and concerns raised
There were
about
a
the tech
few,
school, but
not
no,
to
not
this
a
degree,
few.
with
No.
a balanced budget.
May I
No,
finish
no,
my
no.
point? If we go back and watch those meetings, you will hear Jonathan and Ron
And myself.
and other people
And myself.
saying that we don't want this situation again year after year. So this, you keep saying that nobody raised concerns, which is
Not to the degree
completely
that's
and
being
utterly
pressed this year
false.
was an unbalanced budget. That's my
Jordan,
point.
the whole, no,
And-
that's
and we
actually not the
voted
point.
at the following
point
meeting
is,
to approve the tech school budget.
the point is.
No, that is the
That,
point.
no, the point is that when you have, like Ron said, an increase of that much, $600,000 above what was budgeted, not $600,000, $600,000 above what was,
Joan, you were
budgeted.
here 5 years ago when the plan was to stop pulling from fund balance and to balance the budget and have the districts pay their full share. It is not an increase, it is no longer pulling from fund balance and paying our bill.
there are
So you can keep calling it
departments
an
that
increase.
do have.
But the reality
Megan,
is,
you
it's
just
not
went
an
through this
increase.
lengthy thing of saying we shouldn't hoard taxpayer money. And I completely agree with you. And yet, inside that budget, there are departments that are being given way beyond what they were budgeted before. And there are departments that have traditionally only
It's just-
spent
it's not-
40
you
to
can keep-
50%
Where, show me, Joan,
of what
show
they've
me.
been given. That was what
Show me.
Dr. Bolton had shared with us.
Okay,
so
where, can you
I
show
would-
me?
I
Because
mean, we
none
would
of this
like to-
exists. You can keep saying all these
Dr.
things, but they're
Bolton,
just not
Keep
accurate.
going.
And
Dr.
if you wanna
Bolton
show
can
up to the
share
finance
with you.
committee meeting
Dr.
last month,
Bolton,
for
would
the
you
committee
please
you're
show us
on,
those?
you could have asked those questions.
Would you
But you
please
didn't.
show us, Dr. Bolton, those things that you mentioned to me when we met? If you could share them with the board, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you. They just like to
You could have
scream
pushed it
so
off
that
of-
people
of
think
one.
it's right.
That was
So
all we
that
asked.
we continue to throw out things that just aren't accurate.
Yeah, but then
I
at
mean,
least we
all
could have
the
had a
details are right
discussion.
there.
Yeah, we
Good,
could have had a
just-
discussion.
She doesn't
Just
wanna
could
have
have
a
pushed it
discussion.
off
We're
of
gonna
us.
get the
We've done it
information.
before. We've done it
We're
for
gonna get
many
the
times as a
information.
courtesy to the board.
My
You push
God.
off something that doesn't have to be done. It did not have to
There
be
were no-
past that time,
I
and
asked-
you could have, yes.
I
You
asked
could have done
one
that,
question.
but you didn't.
I asked,
You could
You
have.
forced
I
it
asked for the
through,
question.
and you
Not
should have
have
pushed it
a
you
off.
asked for the budget, I
There
emailed
was
the budget to
something
you
really
8
making
days
sense.
before
I
the
sent you an
meeting.
email, you
Asked
never
for any
responded.
questions
You
and
never responded
got
to my
any
email.
questions.
You did not respond to my email.
What,
I asked
you never
you.
sent me an email asking me
Second.
any questions.
I did not. I did that, but you didn't tell me it was gonna be on the board meeting.
You just
At
said
that
you sent me an
meeting,
email, you didn't
you
send me an email.
said, you said it was, you never said it was gonna be voted on. So, yes, I didn't respond in the 2 weeks
Before
that you
that.
gave me. But I wasn't sure it was
There
gonna,
weren't
you
any
never told.
questions, so we.
But you should,
Because the assumption
didn't
was
take the
that
time
Since
to
then, I
amend
haven't
it?
gotten a single question. I've gotten a lot
I
of
mean,
Well,
at
it's
any
passed
rate, I
now,
just
why
don't
would I just-
understand
But I
the
haven't gotten a
resistance to
single
talking
question.
about.
Well, you passed
this.
Mr. Rice, can we bring this discussion
yeah, I
to
would
an
like
end?
to.
Yeah,
It's really not fruitful for the group.
yeah.
We've already approved the budget. We'll go through an extensive review next year. But as it stands right now, the budget is passed
I agree with you.
and move forward.
Actually,
The courtesy
Thank
of
you.
pushing it off
both
would have been
budgets
nice.
were balanced. Actually, the tech school's budget was balanced, and
But it's
the
really hard. It
the
doesn't
school
mean-
district's budgets were both balanced for this year. Tech school's budget has been balanced the first time in many years,
Yeah.
and this is what, our 7th year, Mr. Daubert, with the proposed balanced budget?
And with only 1.5%
Or-
operational increases from the tech
No, tax
school.
increase, excuse
But
me,
it's
and
money
the
that
5th
don't
With
year
the heavy
balanced budget.
material
Sorry,
testing
consider.
programs,
That's immaterial.
that's
If it's money you don't
congratulatory.
need.
I
All
really
right.
appreciate that.
The next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for May 2nd. Thank you, Mr. Daubert.
Mr. Cormack, anything additional on finance?
No, sir.
Okay. So the question is, from a policy standpoint, do we want to take a short break, or we're just going to keep moving?
What do you want to do?
I think we should keep moving.
I think
Okay. So that goes to Ms. Bates funds,
Oh.
actually.
What's that?
Oh,
we didn't do this.
Yeah.
Do you have a separate sheet for the end of policy over
No,
there?
we should put that back after.
Oh, maybe that's what was under. That's my bad.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect.
I didn't look at that. I assumed that was 2 sheets because they thought it was going to be.
We do both.
All right, so everybody's ready?
So are we taking a break or not?
Yeah.
I think we're just going.
Okay, then I'll call the policy committee meeting to order. First up is public comments, but before we open up public comment, I do want to share, just kind of explain a couple of the policies that are attached, because I know that it can be confusing to kind of read through these and understand exactly what's being proposed. And I also just want to share, so public comment, I will share the name, I'll call the people who signed up for public comment for this committee meeting. If you, throughout the meeting, find that you have an additional comment or question, you can sign up for the second comment period up until the start of the second comment period at the end of the meeting. Two different versions of draft policies are attached to the agenda, dealing with the use of restroom and locker room facilities. Before we open up to questions and comments, I just wanted to give a little bit of an explanation of what those two policies, or I shouldn't say policies, what those two drafts are actually saying. The first one that's attached,
Would you like it on the screen as you're discussing it or not?
yeah, if you want.
Okay.
The
Ms. Summers, are
first-
you able to do that?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first policy breaks down, it defines the fact that, sex is, that the law permits the, discrimination of
different bathrooms and locker room facilities based on sex. And based on that concept, there are 2 drafts. The first draft shows that, says that that the bathrooms and locker room facilities are going to be based on sex. The definition in there is the biological sex classification based upon chromosomal structure and anatomy at birth. And it goes on to say that if a student has a gender, identifies with a different gender than their biological sex, that that particular school would then also have an additional separate bathroom designated based on gender, as well as an additional, if it's a middle school or high school, additional locker room that is designated based on gender. So there would be separate ones. So if you are a biological female who had a gender identity as male, you could use the biological female bathroom and biological female locker room, or you could use the gender male or the gender male bathroom or gender male locker room. Those separate designations. If you are a biological girl who identifies as a girl, then you would use either the gender female or the biological sex female for bathroom or locker room. You would have the option of doing either or. So everyone can use any of them, but the one set is designated based on your gender, the other sets would be designated based on your biological sex. The second policy that is attached, or draft policy that is attached, is based exclusively on biological sex. So all bathrooms and locker room facilities would be based on your biological sex with the same definition. And that brings us then to public comment. The first person we have signed up is Josh Hogan, West Rock Hill Township.
No disclaimer tonight.
Do you want to read policy 903
policy.
statement?
It was not read earlier.
Policy 903, public comment is limited to 3 minutes. All public comment should be directed to the presiding officer rather than individual board members, district employees, or members of the public. For confidentiality and privacy rights, specific comments regarding particular individuals must be communicated privately to the school board and superintendent via email at psdschoolboard@penridge.org.
We were changing that.
Thought it sounded short.
Just in our policy, it doesn't match. Okay.
Thank you, Josh Hogan, West Rock Hill Township. I want to start by saying my opinions on these policies are mine alone. I'm here to support what is termed version 3, or the sex-based policy as you described it, strictly sex-based. I'm going to try to keep my ideological reasons for that out of the conversation, just focus strictly on policy, what is good policy. I really only have one major issue with the policy which I support, which is the sex-based version, and that is I believe that there needs to be stronger language specifically directing what the accommodations are. There have to be some form of accommodations, and I have my opinions on that. I don't think that the administration is given enough tools to solve problems as needed. So I would like to see some sort of guide rails put up about what exactly the accommodations are, knowing that the intent is to have transgender students use single-use facilities. Let's figure out how we want to spell that out. When we look at version 1, okay, these split policy, gender-based policy, however we want to describe this. My main issue here is with the section that says, in a building in which a parent or an emancipated student has informed the district of a gender identity that is different from the individual sex, district shall also provide access to multi-user facilities based on gender identity. Right out the gate, first of all, I believe that that could open a situation for sex-based discrimination, because what happens when you only have one transgender student, for example, a male to female? Does that mean you're going to have a gender-based bathroom for the opposite gender identity? Likely what's going to happen is you're only going to split up one of the biological sexes, not the other. That's sex-based discrimination right out of the gate. Furthermore, it feels to me like, I'm sure that people who have an opposite ideology to me are thrilled with this potential policy. To me, it really reads as separate but equal. And I know that from a legal perspective, that's not exactly the case because of what we're discriminating upon. But 60 years of separate but equal, and pictures of the water fountains that were different and the pools that were different and all that, this feels like, okay, transgender, you can have your bathroom over here. It's not actually constructively solving the problem. Right below that, there's a policy in all school buildings in this district, restrooms, locker rooms, and showers that are designated for one sex shall be designated for use only by members of that sex. No person shall enter a restroom, locker room, or shower that is designated for the use of the opposite sex. I feel like that was probably copied and pasted from the other one because it doesn't make any sense in this policy. So that part right there, again, when you get to the actual section on student locker room access, that's like opposite of the whole policy, so I don't understand why it's there. I hope it's there because your priority was the other policy and you just copied and pasted it in there. Lastly, at the very back, my big question on this one is, in buildings where a parent or emancipated minor has informed the district of a gender identity that is different from their sex, students shall also have access to the locker rooms corresponding with their gender identity. Does that mean the student or the handful of students, or suddenly we're just free for all and everyone can use whatever they want when it comes to the locker rooms? Clearly, I have an issue with putting the onus on biological females to seek an accommodation. That's supposed to be their safe space, the locker room specifically. It's like we're not even talking about bathrooms now, we've encroached on the locker room, so what's next? Those are my main issues with version 1, as I primarily just see it being not as solid policy as version 3, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Leah Rash, Hilltown Township.
Leah Rash, Hilltown Township. I'm talking about the survey policy and controversial issues. One of the changes that was made is that any change to institutional instructional program must go through the board now. It used to just be the major changes. So I'm curious why. How do you guys propose to manage that? How long will it take? Why do you feel the board needs to be involved at this level of any change? And what do you hope to accomplish as the department's supervisors, building administrator, and director of curriculum cannot? Next, about the surveys, the data validation process is going to be burdensome. That's not an over-dramatization or dramatization. When you make this policy, you make the entire district responsible for its implementation. You should go through some scenarios of how this will actually play out. I'll give you a few. Student-generated survey on controversial topic. So the teacher sends it out and waits the week, but some parents did not respond. What do they do? How does the student know who can answer the survey? Are they given a list of names of who they're allowed to give it to? How does the school track that it went to the proper students? Are these surveys no longer anonymous? What if it's forwarded from one student to another student? Do exempt students need to leave the room when the results are discussed? Where do they go? How are we ensuring a controversial topic is consistent? What if a parent thinks it is controversial and the teacher does not? What sort of position does that put the district in? You're culpable now because you've written this policy that you're going to manage it, and it's pretty much impossible to manage. Once you've done something like that, you have to prove that you're doing it well. It should stand up to audits. It should stand up probably to if a parent comes and threatens a lawsuit that I signed, I did not want to do this, and somehow my child got it. So you're actually entrapping yourselves with this policy. It's too vague and over-controlling. Last, the PACE survey. That's a validated survey. I work in research. I know the work that goes into making a validated survey. It's oftentimes years of research, statistical modeling, how you ask the question, where you ask the question. There's lots of work. And so when you do this, you have to send it to the FDA. It's a valid survey. You can't use it, just make up your own. So to remove this survey, you are leaving a hole in your ability to put a gauge on the mental health of these students. You are not replacing it with a survey that you're creating. It's not replaced with feedback from counselors or the police. It's truly meant to be just a gauge, not to link a specific student to an issue, not to link a specific question to a problem, but to measure the current. Lastly, 3 minutes is very frustrating when I haven't gotten a single response from any elected board member since September on a single email I've sent. So, you guys should work on that.
Stephen Rash, Hilltown Township.
You know what, Stephen Rash, Hilltown Township. I want to thank you all for the bathroom policy. You put a lot of work into it, I can tell. It's great. It has the ability to create safe space for our students, and it's really important. And we've talked about this. You've all talked about this. You've gone to great lengths to talk about that. And I think there's a lot of work, especially in version 3, I think it's called. To give every student their ability to feel safe. I feel like you need to go back and look at the other items in prior meetings, in prior policies that really didn't hit the mark with allowing students to feel safe, especially the advocacy policy. I would really like you to go back and look at that because you made such great efforts with this. If you go back and see those things, you can really allow students to feel safe everywhere, including in their classroom. So I really would ask you to revisit some of your existing policies that you've changed. Along with the surveys policy, I want to know why it needs to change. Why are we so worried about students having surveys and this opt-in versus opt-out? So I'd be curious to know what changed. What was the big fear of allowing kids to take surveys? So thank you.
I took some notes of some questions, just in case a little bit feedback. For the first version that we shared, my understanding of the policy or the proposal is that if there is any student who has a different identity, that there would be a separate set of gender bathrooms, male and female. It wouldn't just be one or the other. And also, even if your gender identity matches your sex, you can still choose to use either the gender bathroom or the sex bathroom. It's up to you which bathroom you want to use. It's just that the designation of that bathroom is based on either gender or sex, depending on which one you use. Same thing for the locker room. As far as the change for board approval, it really just matches practice, which is programmatic changes, and we already have to approve any changes to curriculum that are made after curriculum approval. And then if you don't hear back from a parent, sorry, this is the controversial survey. If a parent selects that they want to opt into controversial surveys and they don't respond, then their student cannot participate in that controversial survey. They would need permission. So by it being an opt-in, if the parent does not respond to give permission, then that student cannot participate in the survey. And as far as what defines controversial, there is a definition in there for controversial. So that brings us to policy 119, the second reading for controversial issues.
But
Mrs.
just
Summers?
the one other answer was, I believe it was one survey that triggered this whole thing. One survey with a few.
That's not Hayes. It is the Hayes.
No, it
That's not
started
Hayes.
with the one survey.
Well,
That's pretty much when
Numerous
it
surveys
came
were
up.
brought to my attention, but
Oh, I never saw that. I saw one.
okay.
Did you see any more, Dr. Bolton?
There have been multiple surveys that have been discussed,
Maybe
yes.
you could share.
What were the changes that were made? I know that we suggested some changes at the last board meeting because there was some concern expressed about just kids doing, what's your favorite basketball team or who do you think is going to win the NCAA tournament?
I think she was going to go over those.
Can go through
Yeah,
those.
let's,
I saw, but I looked at it ahead of time, but I was trying to compare, or there were changes actually made in there?
So since the last policy, yeah,
Alright.
since the last policy, I can go through the changes. So under the data verification process, which is on page 3, where parents and guardians identify their child's level of participation in surveys. There were 3 different ones. We took out the second one. So then now it is either I give my child permission to participate in all surveys, or I request to review and sign off on district building generated surveys that are based on controversial topics. So we took out that second piece. So either you're signing off and saying, I'm good with everything, or I want to have access to the controversial ones and decide whether or not I want my child to participate. So that was the first change that was done since the last meeting. Going back on page 2, and it's the 4th paragraph. They were talking about surveys being anonymous and who has, who knows who's completing what survey. The words "to other students" was added to the sentence, so now the sentence reads, though the author of all surveys will be disclosed to other students, participants in student-generated surveys will be anonymous. Before, the words "to other students" was not there.
Indicating that the student's name, the author would be released to parents, and now we're eliminating that.
Correct. And then there also was on page 2 as well, the 6th paragraph. This is the paragraph that talks about parents having to be able to view surveys ahead of time. There was discussion about just making sure this paragraph just is for the controversial surveys instead of all surveys. So for parents, guardians seeking to review controversial surveys before use, they will be given information about those surveys. Before, there was talk about it not matching what we were asking during the data verification process. So that was also changed as well. Those are the only 3 changes that were made since the last meeting.
And that goes back to my question then. I guess I was thinking, at least my concern was, and I thought we were going to address it in this, was how do we differentiate between the survey of, who's your favorite basketball team? I think it was raised in a public comment, who's your favorite Pokemon card, versus a survey, and then there was some discussion about formal versus informal. But I didn't see anything addressed in that regard, because even the controversial issues, I know it's defined, but it says including but not limited to, which is not
Personal
defined.
beliefs.
It means like everything. So it just means that we're mentioning some of the things, but it includes everything, which would be Pokemon cards and basketball teams and everything. So I think I was looking for that, is what, when I was trying to compare, because I knew we had a discussion on it, and my approval of passing this through was recognizing that we were going to fix that to make it better on that, and I didn't see that fixed part.
So the formal and informal part became obsolete when we eliminated option 2. If you remember when we were talking about it, that was the consensus, was instead of defining formal and informal, to just remove the second option altogether so that formal and informal no longer matters. And then parents can only request to review and sign off on controversial topics, not ones that are non-controversial. Because the original breakdown, the reason there was the difference between the formal and the informal was because it said informal surveys on controversial topics, or basically the only informal ones that would be included would be the ones on controversial topics. Now that there is no other option than controversial topics, informal and formal becomes obsolete.
Okay, so we'll put the informal and formal aside, but I'm still wondering because I appreciate the comment about having a practical, like an example. Because even sometimes it's helpful to say, hey, this is an okay type of survey, this is not. But even when kids come back from summer vacation, what was your favorite part of summer vacation? Is that is that a survey, whether it's informal or not?
But if it's not controversial.
But read controversial. Read our definition of
I think it's
controversial.
exactly the same as what we have in advocacy.
Right.
But it is vague. It's a lot more vague when it comes
Well,
to
I
a
think-
survey than what the teacher is
basketball, you
teaching.
think would fall under
Because
this
if you say
definition.
including but not limited to, right?
So then if you took it out, then you would just say.
And that language was
Including-
intended to be there to think through, is there a controversial issue that we did not capture in there to be able to provide
But that makes
administrative leeway to say
Very vague.
that is controversial,
I think that's.
right, as the decision, not to indicate that any survey
Yeah, I
is a
think it
problem,
right.
and that's, that it really
I
is
think we need to
controversial, and
firm
where
that
do
up
we
a little
define
bit,
that in
though.
there?
Yeah.
Would it
So-
make the difference if you just said such as, instead of saying but not limited to?
Because it opens, it makes it
Yeah.
wide open.
I
What
would
could be
such
my
as.
belief has something to do with sports that's offensive to you.
Oh, I feel like
Yeah,
the
No, it says
Cowboys, that's
per-
offensive.
Exactly, I mean,
It's-
it's
no,
what's
talks-
offensive.
It says for
It's-
religion, social issues,
But
political
it's-
issues.
but
No, it says not limited
But
to.
it says, but not limited,
The
so
change
that
is such as.
makes it,
I'm fine
yeah, I
with
think it
changing
needs
to
to be
such as.
changed, I mean,
That's
it-
still
Does
good
such
from
as
a-
cover it?
you want.
I think
Does-
these are the topics we think
Does such
are
as help?
controversial,
Okay,
so
right.
it should be in.
Related to personal
I mean, it really
beliefs
says
such
something.
as religion,
disagree.
It's not the
right?
same thing
Yeah.
at
It
all.
says personal beliefs, your
Not
personal
limited
beliefs,
to,
but
open
not
to
limited to those on
It's
religion,
completely
right?
different.
So if you have personal beliefs, that,
If it
Point
says
itself
such as,
or
you're
something
still not.
well,
limited
I'm not
to
saying
it.
that's
It
the
says
right,
it.
I'm not saying that's the right answer.
I'm fine with making that change, it just, don't be the
Such
assumption.
as sounds good to me.
Personal beliefs regarding these topics, I think, is what you
Maybe.
should be in there, and then if there's something else, then you should add it to there. But you can't just leave it wide open and have,
So can we change
I don't think it's
including but not
I
limited
think
to
Pokemon
as,
cards, who's your basketball, what you did for
Jen, to
education
such as?
is not controversial, and everyone knows that.
Well, can you,
I'm
could you
sure.
even put, could you even put that in there though and say, look, this is,
Example.
yeah, an example of what's not controversial, so that it's clear.
It's
So-
not-
We would have to list.
a lot of these things.
I know,
I'm
but-
sorry,
These
these
examples, the
examples are,
administration can then say, this is controversial or this is not. The administration has the leeway to say, this is a controversial issue.
Remember
Because
your-
if it's sports and it's a survey about whether biological men can play on women's basketball teams, then the administration would have the leeway to say that is controversial and that's not something that's relevant to curriculum or whatever. If it's about your basketball team, I think the administration will quickly. We actually had a parent complaining and saying basketball games were controversial. This gives them the authority to say, we don't consider that controversial.
Mhm.
It has to be some leeway, because we can't
Just
list
remember-
every single thing that is or
I
isn't.
know,
I mean, there are
you're
certain
asking
things
your
down
teachers
fast that,
to do all
Mr.
this, not
Vogel
the
just presented
administration.
on, the sports ones that are in there, and that's about basketball and
I
the
agree,
WNBA.
I agree, but,
It's
but
not
I,
a
from a
controversial
legal
issue.
standpoint, including but not limited to, we get objections to that all the time, because then they want you to further define that. So it's very specific, it's a legalese to
And you don't
make it
include
wide
multiple
open, is what I'm
examples.
saying,
You're
yeah.
saying you would just include a
I-
couple of them?
I'm not, I think it would be helpful at times to say, this is an example of a controversial issue, this is an example of a non-controversial issue. And it doesn't have to be extensive, but it can say, and you could also say such as, but somebody has to work through that.
Those
I
could
think
change.
once you
Those could
start
change
getting
through
into
time,
that, you
though.
get more limited.
Pokemon's
Yeah.
gonna go away by
Yeah,
this.
I know,
It's
but
gonna
so
change through time.
Is it controversial to say what's your favorite holiday? Does that involve religion? If I say Christmas is my favorite holiday, is that controversial to somebody that celebrates Hanukkah?
Absolutely.
So, but I wouldn't think that something like a survey that says,
If you
kids,
list,
what's your
I think
favorite
we need-
holiday?
if you list, you
July,
limit.
Christmas, you know what I'm saying? So
I
it's,
think our administration can use common sense.
but this is for students.
religion
This is
is-
for parents to advise their students.
But
of
what's
what
your
they can.
favorite, like, how was your holiday, or asking it, and then religion come up, it's different if your survey question is like, do you feel like a sinner because you are not this religion? That's different, like, if you're saying, what do you celebrate for your holiday, that is not something that's controversial, like,
I would agree. So
I'm just-
how do you, but that's
then you
not the
have
way
to
that
be
this
specific.
reads.
But again, I feel like that's like
It
a
is
common,
the way that
in
this
my
reads.
opinion, that's like where a common sense is where you use that.
How about-
If you are questioning it as a teacher,
How about
then
Pokemon?
then you
How
should
about if
know.
they have a transgender Pokemon? Would that be a controversial survey, or?
What would be the question?
What's your favorite what's your favorite, Pokemon?
Then it's not in the question.
It's a
in the
character.
answer.
Yeah,
Right,
character.
Kids
But
can
it
answer
could-
however they
how-
want.
I know.
Someone may be offended to somebody because they don't like the fact that.
Is there something?
We're talking about questions, we're talking about surveys, we're not talking about answers.
Jonathan brought
No,
up
it just,
Pokemon.
it was raised in a public comment. And so I just continued that and said,
I just think
why
this
don't
is
we
a
take
bad
this
definition.
illustration and
I
try to
think
work
it
it
puts the
through.
teachers in
I like
impossible
definition.
situations
I don't
to make
understand how
judgments.
that's impossible. It's
I
for
know.
teachers.
I think we can narrow it down. I think it can be.
Okay,
Well,
then
then
do
just
we
put
need
common
to
sense in.
revisit the advocacy policy,
Okay.
because it's literally the
Well, I
same.
didn't like that one to start with,
It
anyway, so it was
literally
vague
says
there
the
too.
same thing.
It's vague, it just keeps the teachers, it just restricts them from doing what they should
Not that
do.
many surveys.
Well, I think
Okay,
that's one of the
so
wording was-
we changed the language to such as,
I would say limited
Is
to, I would
everybody-
take it out.
we did, we
It's
took out,
personal beliefs,
we took out the but limited to part and such as.
What did you say, Ron, about the personal beliefs thing that you said?
regarding.
Regarding,
yeah,
instead
regarding.
of saying
Related.
such as, say regarding religion,
I just think the
social,
way it is now,
political,
it's just
and
too
geopolitical
vague.
matters.
That should get across much of what you want to accomplish, right?
I think such as was
What,
fine, I think that's what
You-
Jen
you.
noted to.
The majority of the board.
I think Is everyone fine with such as? Okay.
Such
All right.
as
Are
works.
there other concerns? Can we
Such
move on from this policy?
It's a safe, it's a safe word. It's good enough for me.
All right, so then that brings us to the review of policies for the first reading.
Wait, on the data verification process, why don't we add another block in there about third-party surveys and let the parents in the beginning of the year say, hey, my kid's okay with any survey you got. Why not give them that option?
Is that the?
They can do that, they just click those three buttons.
So, what? So I know they have to
Oh, you
do the
mean third
PACE
party?
thing separate.
That's
Why not put the third party on?
That's up to the board, whatever you have to do.
Because if a
The
parent,
consensus was, the
So it would be
consensus
another one
was,
for third-party
I
survey.
think there should be one, give them the option to get it out of the way, because most of the parents will be, let my kid, he's a senior in high school, check them all off.
the
Let 'em
consensus,
go.
the consensus was to have parents opt in for all third-party surveys.
I think
so
they
that
should,
was
I think the parent should have that choice, right?
Right.
Right, in the beginning of the year, if your parent, if one parent wants to say, hey, my kid can do it all, then he just has to do it once and he's done, or they're done. What's the harm there?
I think that's what we're saying in that one.
No,
We
it
just
doesn't.
didn't,
Miss
we didn't
Summers,
include
it's
it.
the first,
No,
it's the first line of page
specifically
2.
said that
Can you go to the
it's-
first line of page
Okay.
2?
Specifically
Shall be
said
required.
separately
Shall be
that-
It's the first line of page 2.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So any third party, they have to, right now, they have to go out each time to do that. And I'm saying, a lot
I
of
think
parents
that-
would say, look, I'm fine, just go do it.
I
Done.
think that was the issue because of the PAYS survey and other third-party surveys that people were concerned about who they're
Well,
coming
if they
from
do-
and felt like parents should be informed about who they were coming from, what were the questions.
And if the
Why-
parent
Again,
wants to
whatever
do that,
the
they
board
can
wants
do
to do
that.
on
They
that.
can still do that at that point, in the beginning of the year. And but a lot of parents don't wanna deal with the extras, emails and all that stuff, so let them have that option.
Couldn't you do that, like as a
You
fourth
could-
category?
you could.
Because it's the same question, I give my child permission to
Absolutely.
participate in
And
the
then we'll know,
or the
if people
third-party
are,
survey.
if they're
Right,
really
at
concerned
once.
about third-party surveys, then a lot of people are gonna opt out in the beginning of the year, and then we'll know,
But I think,
right?
Dr.
I mean, then,
Walton,
you still have to go get permission for the
Right.
PAYS, right? That doesn't change.
No, pays, according to the board, we're not doing pays at all anymore. If that changes,
No,
then
we
we need to
didn't.
let
it
people
We
was
know.
didn't
just
say
something that I mean,
I didn't think we
we
said
didn't
that.
vote on it, I'm just, and.
Well, that was the
if, you know,
direction.
okay.
Yeah, I remember that, but I thought we revisited that.
If we want to revisit it, the board can revisit it
Dr.
anytime.
Fulton.
That was the current direction to the administration.
You had said that, for third-party surveys that you review, remember we were talking about these, you said sometimes people doing like a doctoral study would come to you and survey our students.
Right. The only other examples that would fall under that we've used, because we haven't used any other state surveys or anything other than PAYS, is if an internal person is doing doctoral work. We don't accept outside because there's enough employees here. But if someone's working on their master's or on their doctorate and they have something that they want to use that, we go through a process to approve that survey. We do send it to all families in that instance and say, your teacher's doing this, here's what it would take, are you okay with this? And we get their permission. So in that case, we do opt in for those. Now, those are very few and far between. There might have been 3 in my 5 years here that we've done that, and it's usually a teacher with a class of students where they're surveying about homework or engagement or something that they're doing in their master's.
So you're saying that's our current
So.
process anyway?
For those surveys is what we do
So the only
because they
true
are so
third party-
unusual. So
Yeah,
The
we
only
don't
true
do
third
any.
party is PAYS.
Currently,
Which
yes.
is why, yeah, I
Yes,
think the
that
consensus
is-
did say we're not doing PAYS,
Yeah.
but maybe they'll change it when most people don't.
Well-
We saying we're gonna be the only ones in the county to drop out? Is that what we're doing?
Well, Philadelphia listened to it.
Okay, Phil.
And I mean, I did write back to the Ms. Rosati, the Bucks County Drug and Alcohol Director. And, the PACE survey, they could still do the survey. No one's saying that they can't do it. There are other ways to get participants, and I've had my own children participate in studies, but, we don't need to say to our public school students that by virtue of being in this building, you are going to be a participant in this survey. So I suggested that she find other ways to, just like, for example, say like a hospital facility or something, doing a research project. They ask through pediatricians' offices. I'm sure the county has an advertising budget. They could advertise for participants. Perhaps you know, that would be something that the school could inform parents that it's available out there in the world, and they could participate in it by getting in contact with the county. All of those things would be okay. My objection to it was that you have the students here, and, you know, it needs to be more than just, you know, opt out. It definitely has to be opt in. I don't think that they should be doing it here in the schools, but if the, you know, if the board wants to take it up for a vote, and, you know, the majority doesn't agree, that's fine. If they agree, that's also fine. I'm not lobbying one way or the other. I just simply expressed my opinion and gave my suggestion to
We did
Bucks
take
County Drug and
consensus
Alcohol.
over it as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I just don't want, you know, if people want to change it at any time, so be it.
Why don't we just add it in
So
to
it
the,
doesn't
to
sound
the
like-
original survey and ask the parents if they want to
It
vote?
doesn't sound
Why
like,
should
it
we-
doesn't sound like adding that extra category would apply to any
Yeah.
surveys that exist.
Well, then put it in as a
But
page.
wait,
Put it in
wait,
as a
but
page.
but that was the next point I was going to make, is that just because PAYS is the only one that exists today, this policy is for more than just today. Say somebody comes along and wants to do a survey, a third party, it probably would be a good idea to make that fourth. So in the future, just so people know, if any agency comes and a board decides in the future, you know, maybe when some of us aren't here, to do third-party surveys, it would be our policy that parents have to opt.
But still,
in.
an offer. You're not suggesting offering, doing PACE through the school, just
No,
having it.
I'm
as a-
still, I still don't, I think that they ought to find a different
It sounds like
avenue
the
for
only
their
third-party
subjects.
surveys we're doing are ones that process is already consistent with anyway,
But
so it
she's
just seems
saying,
like running
John's saying in case, like, next year,
yeah,
there's
as a
another
disclaimer.
third.
Yeah, I mean, there
could be
anything.
But if there
Put it
was,
in
it
there.
would have to be approved anyway,
As a
because
stopgap.
there isn't one.
Well, I think it's a little different from Dr. Bolton's, the employees' educational surveys. It's a little bit different. It could be another, I can't think of another government agency off the top of my head, but it could be another
So you're having
government
parents
agency that
sign
wants to
off
do
The
on
it.
letting
CDC
their
has
kids
a
participate
survey.
in something
Right.
that doesn't even
Yeah.
exist right now.
Yeah.
That seems a little bit silly
Well,
to say
but
I'm
it-
gonna sign off on something that doesn't even
Yeah,
exist right now.
but, you know, it could.
I mean, you can have it in your policy, but you don't.
Yeah, I'm sure there's
I
other
don't know.
things in our
I feel like
policy
at that
that,
point, if you start doing something new and they didn't know about it and they signed it before it existed, wouldn't you want their permission anyway at that point?
well,
So are we not doing the PACE survey? I thought we revisited it last time where we do it as opt-in at the
No, that was never
So now
changed,
we're-
but if board
Well, I
members would
remember the
like to
first
change
time
it,
we
then
said
that's
that-
fine.
But the second time, so we're dropping, or is that what we're
You're
saying?
the only person that I've heard from that wants to offer the pay survey. If any other board members would like to change
As an
their
opt-in,
decision.
or,
At all.
I mean, as, like, don't the parents have a
Like
say in this at
Philadelphia.
least? What?
To do it like Philadelphia where they don't offer.
Okay, but everybody in this county is doing it, and we're not going to do
it's
it.
fine.
Why don't you ask the parents? Put it on the survey. Ask them. Let the parents choose over the
Fine, if
politicians.
5 board members want us to put it on there, we'll put it on there, but so far, you're the only person
I mean,
that.
like
So
I said,
everybody
I have
else, so
interest.
don't
to
you
do
think
that,
the
but
I
parents
think the
value
school
this
district,
information?
I would have no objection to the school district making parents aware, again, that exists out in the world. This is something that Pennsylvania does.
And then
Here's
they would
how
be
you
able
would
to
do
take it?
that. Oh, yeah.
So the school
because
district
they,
could
not
tell
on
them
our
to go?
time,
Yeah,
not in school.
right.
You would say,
It's one
here's
period.
this organization, they do a survey. If you want to participate, here's a link.
You think
Click
that's
the
gonna
link
give
on
you
your-
good
on
data?
your time.
You think it's
It
gonna
would
give
be
you-
better data than,
not
you
gonna
know,
be good
everybody
data.
just taking it, because
Oh,
there'll be people that will be seeking out to participate.
So you don't wanna, so what are we replacing it with? It sounds like Obamacare, just get rid of it, we
I
don't have
I
a
did,
solution.
the other,
Come up with a solution.
the other thing that I said to the director was that Jonathan made a point about familial attachment being one of the biggest concerns with children and adolescents. And if that truly is the case, then we shouldn't be stepping in between parents and children. We should be
They have a chance to
having
not do
them
it.
to, well, you were saying that they could opt out, and,
They could if it's a concern to them. How are we gonna judge our mental health of our students? We're getting rid of our only measure. You're gonna ask
I don't think
counselors
that's
to get
the
a,
only
hey, I think we're doing great.
I mean, we've done a lot to increase our guidance counselors, our,
But that doesn't give you a measure.
social workers.
Okay,
Oh,
I
it
Doesn't
think
give you a
does.
measure.
I
No, it
think-
doesn't. Gives you I think it's going great.
I totally understand your perspective, but I haven't heard anyone shifting on it.
I agree,
So
I
let's
think
just
we should
have
move on, but it's sad, it really is sad.
So,
Keep our heads in
Are we
the
gonna
sand.
add
it
that?
sounds like
So
is everybody's fine to leave it alone?
can I
Move on?
are we at the data verification process, are we adding something in there about third-party surveys?
That's what I was just gonna ask.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Excellent, Christie. For the future, do we want to put it in there or not?
Because
I don't
if you
care.
put it in there for ones that don't exist, then a parent's gonna sign off on it before it even exists for them to know whether or not to sign off on in the first place,
Well,
so
it
then
apparently
you-
does happen once in a while, right?
But that,
But
isn't
that's
that what we're
only
doing
just
anyway for the
factual.
other surveys? They don't know whether they exist either.
True.
Well, no, these are the ones that exist, these are currently existing.
Yeah, but there may be a student
In
survey. that
theory,
we don't-
they
yeah,
exist, but they don't
yet.
exist
But we're doing the same thing.
specifically.
So if we
And
put it in
I
there,
don't
what
think
does
I
it?
just think if you get to a point where you bring in a third party that someone thinks is an issue, right? And you point back and say, well, you signed at the beginning of the year that they could do all third party surveys, and they say, well, I signed that in August, and you brought this survey in January,
But
how
that's
was
the
I
case
supposed
for
to-
every single one of these things.
Yeah.
Every single one of these someone could say that, well, I signed that in August, and I had no idea that this controversial topic of
So we could add
pick
that,
one.
we could add that one
It's
section
gonna
and
be
move
that.
on.
I don't see
Well,
the
no,
harm.
I understand both points, but the difference in our surveys is we are able to break them down right here as to controversial or non-controversial. A third-party survey, we have no idea what it is.
I
So-
think that third-party survey is always gonna be controversial.
Well, exactly, I mean, I just.
Well, we have that top on page 2. All parents, guardians shall be required
Yeah,
to
that was a
opt their
sentence.
child into any third-party survey in order for their
Yeah,
child to
so there
participate.
you go.
But then how are they gonna opt in? What's the mechanism we have to opt them in?
No,
Wouldn't
they
you
have
wanna
to
have
opt
that?
into each individual survey, the
So
same way,
the
it's
types.
as if
I
they
guess it's types
automatically
versus-
selected the bottom option.
I guess it's a type of.
We have
Which
to
is,
send it to
I request
them.
you sign off on only, third-party generated surveys that are based on controversial topics. And that means if a third-party survey is issued, they would have to sign off on it.
Would you,
it be listed in data verification?
Because there isn't an option to say, I give my child permission to participate in all third-party surveys.
Well, wouldn't that be opting in then?
No, that would be one of the two options here. What we're saying is third party only has the last option, they don't have the first option.
Well, wouldn't they have one that says I opt in or I opt out, right?
could
So
you just
wouldn't you,
add it,
right,
like
just
the
add it there
district
to say,
slash building
If
slash third
a
party?
majority of the board wants to add it, then it can be added. We would have to remove the line at the top that says that all third party surveys require parents to opt in.
well,
And
that's
then
actually
we
what
would
we're doing.
instead put
So you're
the
pulling it
from the
different
top, the
options
second
at the
page.
It's,
bottom.
page 2.
Top of page, first sentence of page 2.
We're saying just to move it.
Just move it down to the bottom, under data
Right, well, all you would do, you would
verification.
remove the line at the top that says that you that you have to always opt in, and you would put it at the bottom as a fourth category and list the two different choices like you did for the others, if that's the direction from the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
When you say, you mean third category?
The first and third,
Make
because
it
the
a
second
fourth.
one was eliminated.
You will
It
also
would, it would be a fourth category.
Yeah,
Correct.
okay.
So-
Fourth category that says I give my child permission to participate in all third-party surveys, or I request to review and sign off.
Mhm.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it sounds,
I
And then the
don't think
second,
that's,
the second paragraph there, we would also add, it says, at the beginning of each school year, in conjunction with the data verification process, parents will have the opportunity to identify the level of their child's participation in all
Surveys.
surveys. We'll
Right.
just take that part out.
right.
This shall include district building, teacher, and student surveys. So this shall include third-party districts. So can you just add third-party there, district?
You just move.
Yeah.
yep.
And then removing that other line where it says that they automatically opt in, or automatically have to opt in, and then putting the same categories at the bottom. Okay? Everybody okay to move on?
That was easy.
It's just, what I find laughable about this is we're trying to shelter our children. Everyone else carrying a phone where they can find all this
But Ron,
stuff.
that's like saying
But I
like
mean,
they're.
but you can't
You
stop
can get
it. You-
heroin at the park, but we're not gonna give it to them at the school, I mean.
No,
it-
that's totally different than
I don't see it as
that. I
different.
do. You're
I
trying to
just- I
shelter
mean,
them when.
It's not
they're-
about
they're-
sheltering, it's about
Yes,
giving, it's about, for
they
me,
need to be
well, I'll
exposed
tell
to
you
the
what it
real
is for
world.
me. It really is just this notion of, just because you're here, are you talking about the whole policy in general?
I'm Just talking about surveys and trying to restrict it, all these,
Yeah.
it's so vague, it's just gonna
I mean, I hope it
handcuff our
doesn't get
teachers.
cumbersome.
It
But Ron,
is.
there's kids in 6th grade who, they don't even know some of the stuff on these surveys.
They are.
And they're
Some.
introduced to, well,
They
some
really are.
parents have locks on their kids' phones, some kids.
Yeah, I know
don't.
there are some, but you go into
Yeah.
middle school, most of the kids have phones.
Yeah,
Right,
but
and they're
again,
gonna
you don't
access
have to
whatever
be
they
the one
want.
to provide it to them, they can.
And this isn't
Yeah,
gonna
let's
change.
make
Alright,
it
This is
so
not
are
gonna
we-
change it.
Can we move to the
Yes.
next? So,
119 done.
review of policies for the first reading. The first one is 137.1, extracurricular participation by home education students. Mrs. Summers?
So because of the recent changes to the home education policy, 137, home education programs, this policy was added to our agenda just to review so we can reflect the changes to allow participation in activities that also include a class component for credit during the school day. So what the language will change, will say the following sentence was edited to note the following, and I'll show this to you on the policy. For some reason it did not come up,
Number 8.
the red and the green, so it's on page 2. It's number 8. So what this will say now is that if a class for credit during the school day by the school district is required for participation in activities that take place outside of the class, home education students shall have equal access to participate in such activities. And we took out the words not be eligible, because now with the new guidance for next school year, they'll have access to up to 25% of their classes, which could be a part of this. So we're just reflecting that change for the next school year.
Sounds good.
Are we okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. Policy 906, public complaints.
I ask about it's not really about the policy, but maybe for another time. Why don't we have JROTC in Penridge? I mean, I don't know I know we have it in the time that I've lived here, but I've always been curious about it, why we don't. So if you,
Mhm.
not for tonight, but
Mhm.
maybe another day, if you
Mhm.
can explain that.
So the second policy, 906, public complaints, Dr. Robarczyk had requested to add this policy to update the language in the policy in regards to federal programming. And really you're just changing wording from the words "no child left behind" needs to be replaced with "Every Student Succeeds Act." So what I did was I just went through and changed those pieces. That was the only change to the policy.
Everyone can move forward with that?
Yep.
Okay. The use of restroom and locker room facilities.
Would you like me to bring a particular version for you to review?
Start with 1 and then do
I guess
3.
we can just should we just open discussion?
You can put them
We
all
need to
out
have a
there.
summary of what the two different breakdowns are of the two different policy proposals, and then board members can.
Are we just gonna say which one we're in favor for?
Unless
It's
anyone has
pretty
any
clear,
I have some
right?
general,
comments
I have some
or
questions on
comments?
the definition section. It is interesting. Why, you think it would just be defining terms, but why, and I'm wondering if that language needs to be moved some other place too, because you know
Which
where.
policy?
You mean any
This is on
comparison?
version, on both version 1 and version
Same.
2. Under sex, we have sex as defined, but then we have 2 paragraphs underneath that, which aren't really definition
right.
sections, you know what I mean? It just from a readability component, I wonder if those would be better put someplace
Go
else.
under like student restroom
Or something, yeah, or
access.
something.
Alright, I don't think
Oh,
that those
I
are meant to be under definitions, I think there's just one definition, so maybe the space.
No, there's multi-user facility is a definition, single
Oh, I
user.
see, okay.
You see what I'm saying?
This is not consistent.
Just
Seems
the 2
odd.
paragraphs under sex.
Oh,
Okay,
I feel like that would go under the student access.
Under
Or maybe
student
under-
access.
Or maybe it's.
That's true.
so but does it make sense to maybe move those 2 paragraphs to just underneath those definitions? So the definitions are all together, and then leave a bigger space, and maybe put it over in a heading?
Well, I think
Under
he's saying
guidelines.
rather than even have them under definitions, it would make sense to have them maybe under guidelines.
Right, what I'm saying is, take them out from definitions,
That's
move up all the definitions, right?
Yeah.
And then put them
Oh,
underneath
yeah,
that as a
same.
separate, under a separate heading.
What heading?
Does that go under guidelines or
Yeah,
under?
maybe
Yeah.
it makes sense under guidelines.
It's really a list.
Right, scope could be next, leave scope where it is, and then
Yeah.
put that, add that under guidelines.
We were able to split screen.
Very good.
Version 3 is on the left, version 1 is on the right. And I don't want to try to mess with it, so I'm sorry it's
If
backwards.
you do a
Okay.
Windows key, right, left arrow, and then you can pick the other one, they'd be side, perfect.
We'll just leave it.
Oh, no.
Unless he goes back there and does it for you.
Is the topic, is the
Let's scroll.
heading scope in both of them, is it identical in both of them? Yes. Okay, so if it's identical in both of them,
Let's go.
Yes.
what about visitors? It says this applies to the entire community, including educators, school and district staff, students, parents, and volunteers, but it doesn't indicate a visitor, like
What's that?
That's
So-
very
What version?
well, it's
Oh,
identical in
it's
both of
okay.
them,
Oh,
so
okay,
it's
right.
scope,
Okay.
whichever one we end up with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think there should, I don't know.
Yeah, they're not captured under, I mean, often our visitors are parents or
Well,
volunteers, but I
yes.
understand there would be times it's others.
Okay.
So under scope, we would add it, we would say students, parents, visitors, and volunteers, is what you're suggesting,
Yes.
right? Okay, and that's, no matter what version we land in, that's gonna be the same, so.
I think there was also one of, I was trying to read up on the emails before coming in here. One of the other comments, was that we don't define that the same rules apply for the breakdown of the staff bathrooms. So, regarding multi-user, I don't know if we wanna add language that says that the staff will
What was
be
that?
handled the same way or not.
What was the email? I read them, but I don't remember. You said there was an email about what was it?
I don't remember, I read several emails, I just
Yeah.
remember a comment having to do with
Some of the things.
whether or not we define.
I don't understand what section you're referring to.
It's not in a section, that's the point.
Okay.
I think the question was, we went
Do we
into
wanna add it?
detail about how we're designating student bathrooms, but we didn't go into
Got it.
detail about staff, even though it applies to staff. So in other words, would the same rules apply to staff?
Mhm.
Does it overlap or is it the?
Like as far as multi-user, because independent would obviously be the same, but
Mhm.
What's the is the, or the requirements?
I don't know that you
similar?
necessarily would have to deal, I don't know that you'd have the same kind of issues with
Well,
I thought it covered them.
I mean,
adults, because I don't know that adults are gonna be
It's
as
fine.
concerned, I don't know. They can police themselves, I don't know.
well, no, it's not about
So you-
policing themselves so much as saying this is going to be, I mean, I could see a situation where an employee of one, you have this for students, why don't I get the same, protection?
And I think we discussed this before, but the hard part here is trying to balance between, we had the 11th Circuit come out with their decision, which was different than what we had in the 3rd Circuit, and trying to reconcile those two, where they're not reconcilable, so we're governed by the 3rd Circuit, so trying to figure out what does it mean, for us from a policy standpoint. I think that's the difficulty, and we won't know until it's reconciled by the Supreme Court between those two different circuits.
Well,
Right.
And we received, this, one of the firms that we work with, sent along a little article or whatever about the Supreme Court, the decision in West Virginia, or about West Virginia, where they didn't allow West Virginia to uphold their law that they wanted to pass. So, and they said the same thing about the Supreme Court.
But
Well, actually, it was the
we have to
Supreme Court
decide
that
now,
made
I think.
Yeah, I
Right,
know.
we have
I
to
know.
Can't leave
decide
it next
now.
year, the 11th.
But
I'm not waiting.
Supreme Court could take a little while.
Right, and
It
put
will
it in
take a
the
while,
policy.
but the problem is too, that in the, authority section, I think the authority section in both are the same. It speaks to.
Not identical.
Oh. They're not identical.
What is it?
The authority is not
Facilitate
identical.
compliance with local, state, and federal laws regarding student and staff
So-
use of
So
restrooms.
the difference is the language as they are currently interpreted, because I think the understanding is the law as written says that you're discriminating based on sex, which is interpreted by definition as biology, and so the one policy says based on the law, and the other says based on the law as being interpreted in the courts. And so that's the difference in the definition between one version and the other version. Whether or
Right,
not
but
you're
the-
following certain court rulings, or whether or not you're following what the language in the law from 1976 says.
But the district, the third district, it has the force of a,
Yeah, it has the only way you understand what the law is for the courts to interpret it.
But
So
it's not,
it becomes common law, so it has the same force
but the
and
only
effect.
law is still from the 1949, that's the only law. The
But
Third
it's
Circuit and the
interpreted.
11th Circuit are still, but that's based off of, one case with one particular people and one set in time, but there's no statute that says that it's illegal to do, whether sex-based or if you would go. The
But-
Third Circuit, the 11th Circuit, I know what you're saying, and you said there's nothing to reconcile between the two. However, the Third Circuit doesn't have a required, it's still in the holding of that circuit or that court, it says that Boyertown, they basically decided, Boyertown said they may
No, I don't
do what
disagree.
they're doing. So to me, I know you're saying there's reconciliation, but I still feel like that, you're right, we are living in the Third Circuit, but that even with that case, we're still able to do either, because it wasn't a required,
The
it was a
only
may,
thing-
it wasn't a shall.
It deferred to the school district, which, the way that they set it up. But the one
Right.
thing that's been said to us, and this is the thing that I think we have to focus on, because the way the courts interpret the statute is the way, that becomes the law. I mean, that's the common law at that point, and that's how it's gonna be interpreted. But in that Third Circuit opinion with regard to Boyertown, it says, as we explain more fully below, requiring transgender students to use single-use or birth sex aligned facilities is its own form of discrimination. So
That was the opinion, though.
I agree, but
Not
that's the
the
law.
holding,
That's the
but
law.
that was
what-
the opinion, Judge, not the holding piece of that.
You can argue whether it's dicta or whether it's
Right.
controlling, but that same
Right.
opinion was then cited, and they're not gonna cite it as dicta in the Minersville case, where they said barring transgender students from restrooms that align with their gender identity would itself pose a potential Title IX violation.
But it wouldn't pose a Title IX violation, because Title IX.
Well, that's not what the court said though, but this is from the Western District of Pennsylvania, so what,
there's
what
no
was-
statute.
Did you say potential? What did that say?
it said a potential Title IX violation, pose a Title
Right,
IX, potential
potential.
Title IX violation.
Because
Shouldn't we
Title IX says
include
you
what
may
our
have
legal
separate
counsel
bathrooms
told
and
us?
locker rooms.
Shouldn't
Yeah,
we
so-
include
so-
that in the
but-
We
discussion?
should not be discussing,
But
Well,
thinking.
what the
Red-
recommendation
We
is.
should not.
I think you can share your
Your opinion.
perspectives.
Okay, my
on
perspective.
What you wanna do, but I
Okay,
wouldn't,
thank you.
I wouldn't get into, I
No,
wouldn't
I'm not
go
gonna
to
say
everything
what
about-
he said. My interpretation is, if we go with policy one, we're gonna end up getting sued and it's gonna cost us a lot of money. Now, I would like to try to,
I think
It was
every
policy
knowledge.
three.
Three.
Yeah.
three, sorry.
version 3.
There we go. Sorry. So, I mean, I think the compromise is a good solution. We still would only do one bathroom per facility. That gives anyone who has trouble with that, still has sex-based ones that they can go to. And it helps these kids who struggle and trying to give them a place to make them feel safe. And everybody's covered in that, and I think it's a good compromise, so that's my viewpoint.
So basically, we would have 5 restroom facilities in the building then, right? So you have bio, male,
Multi-use.
sex, based upon sex, male,
The majority, most of them would be.
female based upon sex, male based upon gender, female based upon gender, and then a single-use facility.
Well, there's 7 total. So
Would you mean the
there'd be
staff
6
or?
bio, and you're saying.
Well, I'm just saying, there's
She's saying a different
5
aspect.
It's
specific
just categories.
facilities.
How we structure those
Right.
is not dictated. So you could have one multi-user based on gender, and you can have more if you wanted to, right? doesn't come out in this, I don't think, is that
And,
correct?
and what's interesting, at least for me, it said, in the opinion, it said, barring transgender students from restrooms that align with their gender identity, would be problematic. And the same thing and requiring them only to use, not to be able to use that facility. So if we create a gender-based bathroom, then it seems like that would resolve that issue that's there. And I don't know whether we're trying to be creative as we can and trying to be respectful as we can, but it seems like that is a pathway to try to accomplish that.
I agree, and it could save us a lot of money too.
Yeah, I don't know whether, I think anybody can sue anybody for anything, but I do think it's
But
compelling.
there's precedent where they lost,
Yeah.
right? There is precedent where they lost,
Yeah,
right?
and I
So
think
do we wanna do that and argue it
Well, there's
again?
precedent where they didn't, and it's.
But in the Third
Right.
Circuit,
But
in
I
the
don't
Third Circuit, they lost.
Right,
On
where we
precisely
live.
that thing.
This
But it's
is
a
the-
may, not a shall. They didn't lose and say it's required, and it's not illegal to
Yes,
use
it is not
sex-based
illegal,
bathrooms,
but it
to
is
separate
something
bathrooms
that
based
there is
upon
precedent.
sex. That really is the only law, true law, that is still
Yeah, but you're
out there.
not a
You
lawyer.
can-
You're not a lawyer.
I'm not saying I am.
I know you are,
I'm
but you're
speaking-
interpreting the law. And
I'm not interpreting
He
the law.
said-
There is one in 1949 that is the law.
has an opinion, exactly, but you have to follow the rules and the opinions of the courts.
The courts, and
That
it's
is
a may,
interpreting-
it's
they
not a
always
it's not a
interpret.
shall. That is where there's different, again, that's why in the language in the
We
law
wanna
it
risk
says
that.
the way it's being interpreted.
Okay.
So.
You know, that's fine, I don't think we're gonna
It
change
does-
anyone's
I mean,
opinion.
it does have the force of that law. Jonathan, what did you say? You said, you read from the
Well-
Western District of Pennsylvania, it says,
Well, they were citing the Boyertown case
yeah,
and saying that it poses a potential Title IX violation. It's barring transgender students from restrooms that align with their gender identity, which we would not be doing if we passed the version 1, we would not be barring them based upon their gender identity. We said you can use the bathroom based upon your gender identity. But people who have an issue with that have a bathroom just based upon their sex. So that was trying to, and so I think that the conclusion of the case was that, and I would hope that this would be said about us, would be that the Penridge School District has adopted a very thoughtful and carefully tailored policy in an attempt to address some very real issues while faithfully discharging its obligation to maintain a safe and respectful environment in which everyone can both learn and thrive. And that's hopefully what our aim is, to try to do that, and trying to find that balance between people who are trying to just use the restroom, right? And I get the issues, I mean, I get the concerns, but we're trying to find the best approach for that, and there's not an easy solution.
But Title IX does say specifically that you may have separate bathrooms and locker rooms and shower facilities on the basis of sex.
Agreed.
It's definitely in there. So, you know, I get what you just read, but it's in there, so,
but that's itself being changed.
That's fine, I'd like to hear from everybody else,
Well,
because.
do we
Well,
wanna
no one's keeping
say
me from
which
speaking.
one people wanna move forward, or do
Speaking,
people want
yeah.
more
Let's
discussion?
do that.
Well, I have a
Stop
question
talking.
about
Just wanna hear
Title
other
IX
people's opinions.
violations, because it is,
Everyone's adults.
Not everybody.
there is actually an effort by the current administration they are revising Title IX. They're seeking to revise Title
They're
IX.
seeking, yeah, but.
So,
Are you
well-
talking about the article we got today?
Well, no, I mean, in addition to that, this is something that was already occurring. They made noise about doing this a while ago, so, you know, you do, like, what happens in the event that you choose to do something? And this is why I wish that we would have, you know, the solicitor when we have to discuss things like this. But in the event that you choose to do something that could be a violation, what occurs, you know? That is something that people do need to consider. You have to think about what that's gonna be, and whatever strategy you decide to go with, or whatever choice you decide to go with, you're gonna have to have a strategy in place, and thinking about, okay, if we do this, this is going to happen, and this is how we're going to handle that. Can we handle it? Are they going to be able, and I don't even know that this would possibly be true, but, you know, how would that affect our funding and our immediate, cash flow? It's just those kinds of things that I think you can make whatever decision you want, But you do have a responsibility to the community to also think about what the impact of your decision will be. So that's why I don't know
Well,
that,
sadly, I think no matter
Well,
what Jonathan said,
yeah,
anybody can
anybody will
sue,
sue
I mean,
anybody.
no matter what.
well, but I think there
And
are
so-
considerations for, you know, yes, anybody can file a lawsuit against you, but this would also, there's also the consideration of what the government could do to you, which would be different from, you know, what individuals can do on the basis of just filing a lawsuit. I fully expect that any way you go, you're gonna get, you know,
And I think our
sued.
administration is gonna continue to seek to change Title IX. You know, but we can't make decisions based on
Well,
whether they
but
will not
the
do that,
way
or
that-
whether they'll be successful.
But that, the district or the third district, even though you wanna say it's not a law and whatever, it is what, like, we have to think about what they could immediately do to us. That's what I wanna know.
50% chance.
No, it's not, well,
No, it depends.
We all heard what our solicitor said, didn't we? We're not worried.
Can't.
No, I mean, everybody,
Your opinion.
no, but we were all in that meeting where he explained it to us.
Your opinion, please.
Okay, so we wanna just go
Just,
around
yeah,
and
just,
share
Well,
which
part, I mean,
policy you wanna put forward to.
I think I welcome the input from the public to try to sort through this, because I feel like I've thought about this 50 different ways, and I wanna see where the community is. My leaning is toward, I started out with version 3, and I've come around to version 1, and I think that I've landed there. I'm not saying that there's not a perfect pathway, but I think that it makes more sense from an implementation standpoint, because the way that I'm looking at this comes from how are we gonna enforce that? And I think it's easier from an enforceability standpoint, version 1, than version 3 is, I think, from my perspective, harder to enforce. So knowing that it's gotta be implemented, we're not just passing a policy in a vacuum, that it's gonna need to be implemented and workable. I think version 1 is more workable within the setting. So that's the way I'm leaning, but I wanna hear from the public as it relates to, maybe I'm missing something and maybe there's some other perspective that needs to be heard.
Well, how do
Well, I think
how
we
do you
already
suggest
had
we're
public
gonna,
comment.
other than the emails?
No, I mean like through the board, like, you know, I'm not saying
Oh,
just at this.
oh.
So when it's gonna have to go for 2 reads, right?
Right.
So we're gonna hear it at 2 different full board meetings. But I welcome that. I mean, I've been processing it. It's gonna take other people time to get up to speed on that. I've been researching it, looking at cases, trying to figure it out, you know what I mean?
Who would have ever
Well,
thought
can
we talked
we-
so much about bathrooms
um,
and read so much about bathrooms?
is there anything that prohibits us from passing 2 versions as first read?
Yes.
So, no,
I think we
listen,
should make a decision.
like,
You can't
Right
pass
now.
two, you have
I
to
think
pick one to pass.
we should pick one and
Pick
go
one and
forward.
move forward with it.
And let the
well,
public
because, but
modify
if you do
it.
that, you can't substantially change either. So if you pick one,
If you pick one
You
and then
can't
you wanna
change it.
switch, then you would have to go back to first read.
Correct.
okay, so that's what I'm asking, like, you
Yes.
would not be
Yeah,
able
that's
to
fine.
change
That's
it.
fine.
Right.
That's fine. That's the way it should work.
So if we change it, we would just have to go back to first
Yeah.
read.
But yeah,
In the definition section, though, when you look at them, it says, basically, in version, are they still reversed or is that
Yes,
version 3?
they're reversed. That's 1 on the right, 3 on the left.
Trying to confuse us.
Uh-huh. No, it's just, that's
It's
what
showing
it's
it.
reversed. In definitions, go ahead.
Just having a little fun with us.
Because it essentially says the same thing. If a student has a gender identity, I'm reading the left side, so I think that's
Version 3.
3. If a student has a gender identity that is different from his or her sex, their sex, that student or a parent is going to inform the district.
That talks about storing of the information. That
It
parents
doesn't-
can make the school district aware, just like they could make them aware of, my child needs to go to
Yeah.
their confirmation
Mhm.
lesson.
that doesn't
you know.
give
But
them
it
any
does,
right.
doesn't it
That just
say the
defines-
district will keep record of such, any
Mhm.
accompanying accommodation requests?
Yeah, so you're trying to make a reasonable accommodation,
Mhm.
still
Right,
within
but-
version.
So that reasonable
But that conditional
accommodation
basis
could
says-
end up being what?
So you have the single user restrooms, maybe
That's-
another accommodation at some point would be to add on more single user restrooms. Because within version 3 policy, it states that, you know, you have to go to the bathroom based upon your sex. So an accommodation could be like if it's a student and they, request, I don't know, more privacy, maybe you look directly at their schedule and, I don't know, if there's multiple English teachers, but one is closer to a single user, like maybe you look more deeply at a schedule and make it more tailored to give them more access to that bathroom. Those would be accommodations, because within that, I mean, you could have accommodations like that, just like with the locker rooms, it
When
could
it
be.
says someone in their changing room, if
Right,
they,
it
so that
could
they
be
don't
that
have
team room
to,
next to locker room.
nobody has to know
Could be,
why.
right. So, I hear what you're saying. You're saying it looks like an accommodation could be like you can go to a multi-user bathroom, but that in the policy specifically says you have to go to the bathroom based upon your sex. So an accommodation
Or
would have to be
to a
something separate, whether it's like a single user or maybe the locker rooms, like I said, the team room that's next to it has a lock and that is used for students who want to change there.
I think it's clear, it's got it defined.
Alright, so you wanna put forth version 1, but you're open-minded for future
Open-minded,
discussion? Christine?
I would say the same.
1?
Open-minded.
Put up, right?
Version 3.
3?
I am torn between both. And I don't know exactly which way to go at the present moment in time. It's just, it's too confusing. It's not confusing, but the issue is confusing. And my other point is that it's a numbers game for me. We're looking at 15 to 16 children in the total population that we're changing all our bathrooms for. And that's what I'm wrestling with, so that's why I can't make a decision on one or three. So.
Alright, I'll come back to you.
Thanks.
Version 3.
I'm sorry, Dana?
Version 3.
Okay.
I would prefer version 3, but I have a lot of questions about, I want that you have to have a process and an understanding of what's going to happen, how you're going to handle it, and we
Do
can
you feel
also.
like we have that with either one, really?
No, not, I mean, no, I think the exposure is different, definitely, between one and the other. Your exposure is definitely going to be different. And there's other considerations, again, besides just individuals having something to say about it. There could be other entities that could have something to say about it, and that could impact us. I just want more information from the solicitor about those things and how they might impact us.
I think that would be a good conversation to have too.
Haven't we
I-
had that like 5 times?
Well, not actually, because when we, we're not allowed to apparently discuss things here, so, it's not actually the conversation, that we've had, I'll just say that.
Correct. You have additional questions based off the document you're reading.
Yeah, this
Right,
is different.
that's- yep.
This is, what is in front of me now is different from what was, the
So
understanding.
Dr. Bolton or Megan or anybody really who might know, so let's say we pass one version and then we meet with Mike. Let's say the majority votes either version, we meet with Mike, the majority changes their mind, are we back to first read? Is that
What
how that
happens
works?
is, let's say we had the conversation between this meeting and
the next
the board
policy.
meeting.
Okay,
Then what would happen is someone could make a motion, well, I mean, we could really put a different one on the agenda, or someone in an open meeting could make a motion to approve a different version. And modify it, as long as it's on as long as it's listed as an agenda item, you can pass whatever version of it you want. The sunshine, it really just means that topic needs to be on the agenda for the board meeting.
So we could
Okay.
meet before the
But-
board and put one policy.
Right,
and
but,
everything.
obviously, for transparency purposes, if it was going to change between this meeting and that meeting, it would be helpful to post the version people want to approve, so that the
Right.
public is aware that that's what version we're looking to
That's
approve.
It's
You know.
15 days from now.
So are you saying, you're saying which version?
I mean, if you're going to be able to change it, then put, version 3.
Version 3 is the one we left.
One, and then just one other comment, I think we would only change 2 bathrooms in the whole high school out of this, because this does say only if someone identifies, right? So we're not talking about other schools. Potentially, we're only talking about 2 bathrooms in high school, as opposed to all of them. That was the only thing I wanted to comment on, so I would go with number 1.
So which version were you on?
One, those. One,
One.
one. I keep mixing them up, sorry.
So we're tied, okay?
Well,
And
Wait, what
there's
do you
a
mean?
good reason
well, he's
to-
not voting yet.
I know, he has, that's why it's 3-3.
Okay, it's 3-3.
Well, I just, if you,
Wait,
you, I'll-
I would lean more towards version 3, to be quite honest with you. I mean, I'm absolutely open to having more conversation, but I am leaning more towards version 3 for the options that we have.
did you vote?
I keep
So,
looking back and
I-
forth at everything. It's
I get the impression no one really knows what they wanna do and wanna have a discussion with Mike. Should we
well,
say,
yes,
should we say,
That's
that's
fine.
exactly
We're
what I
gonna
think
have
that
a-
we
I thought we had
should,
that.
that's
should
what
we
I'm
say
trying
we're
to
going to
say.
have another, should we say that we're going to have another executive session between now and?
I all the
We
time,
already
every
had-
day from
I
now,
already
and
had
nobody responded.
And one,
I'm like,
and then one of the versions will appear on the agenda at the board meeting.
I thought we already,
Well,
I
we
think-
did, but again, we did not, this
it
wasn't
was pretty close.
the, I know, no, I agree with you
Maybe
that there
we
was
Having
a,
the
side
but
by side, but
it's not,
I know,
there's
it's
some
never gonna.
additional
That's fine.
considerations I wanna.
I got to put these side by side and line by line, but
Okay, aside
Bigger
from the discussion that we'll have between now and then, the wording of the two policies, is that something that we
No.
wanna correct?
Yes.
Or change or modify?
I want to read those emails that we got today again. I just didn't have.
Yeah, that one email's really long.
Long.
Um,
If, I don't know if I need to, off the
I had
top.
to read it several times,
Well,
but, there is something, and I think it's identical. No, it's not, it wouldn't be identical. It would only be in version 3. The one that restricts based on sex. I think it says in there somewhere, there's a sentence in there that says, at no time should anybody be in a restroom of the opposite sex or a facility of the opposite sex.
in
I
version
saw
3.
that somewhere.
I
Version
heard
three
the
or-
last paragraph, under student restroom access.
Yeah, under student restroom access, no person shall enter. So I was just kind of thinking about that and in different scenarios. And okay, I mean, emergencies would be, I would hope that people would not have an issue, but that's not necessarily true, is it, that we don't have someone, wouldn't have someone of the opposite sex needing to enter a restroom?
The locker.
Or no person shall enter a restroom, locker room, or shower that is designated for the use of the opposite sex. And I
So-
just, I mean, I don't
which
know.
version are you, you're on?
Version-
That must be
Paragraph
three.
3,
Under student restroom access. Oh, that says student restroom access.
Student locker or student?
I think the intent of that line is clear. If there were an emergent situation, right, there's a
Right.
fire in a bathroom and somebody goes into, if I ran into a
That's
female bathroom to
evacuated.
save somebody who was screaming,
Mhm.
I don't think anyone would
What
look at this
about,
policy
like,
and say,
Then,
right,
you know, like someone's gonna go in
Close your
because
eyes.
someone thinks that somebody's vaping or those kinds of things. People that check the restrooms, it's always
right, we do not.
of the same
Correct, we
sex.
currently
Okay.
do not,
But that's not
right,
students.
send individuals into, well, these are student restrooms we're talking about, but yes, yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, any other language comments, questions?
So we're not deciding, we're deciding to go.
You didn't weigh in.
It's torn, so.
So you're not gonna, you made us all offer an opinion, are you gonna offer?
Right, like
What's
I
your
think, yeah, you should offer your opinion as well.
The opinions were that everybody doesn't know what they wanna do, so we said that
That's
we
not
would
your
have a
opinion,
discussion.
I'm just interested in your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My biggest opinion is that I don't think that we should be having all of these single-user facilities. I have significant concerns about the single-user facilities and the danger they pose to students. I think that we had an attempted rape in this building before we had single-user, and I replay that situation in my mind all the time and think, what if that happened in one of those single-user bathrooms and someone locked that door and we wouldn't be able to get in and get that kid out? So honestly, that's what weighs on my mind.
But what about
those
this?
single user, someone who overdoses in a single user bathroom, and we don't know for hours because someone just thinks, hey, that bathroom door's locked, someone must be in there, and moves on to a different bathroom, and we have no idea that someone has passed out in that bathroom, or someone,
So, but what policy
Yeah,
if regarding
it doesn't
this
solve,
topic?
honestly, I
that's a
would
separate
prefer,
discussion, though. It's a valid point.
I would
It's a separate
prefer,
discussion.
I would prefer we eliminate the single user bathrooms instead.
So is that one?
No policy.
That's
I thought we were trying to move toward, in
Yeah,
some
like,
ways,
I
I
mean,
thought
that's
we
a
were moving
complete,
toward more
you know,
single
of
use.
these two, these are,
thought that
you
was
know,
the-
everybody else is having to say of these two, but I do wanna be mindful of people's needs, but I think it seems to go in one direction. We have to be mindful of all students' privacy,
what we're
needs
supposed to
and
do.
dignity, so. I don't know. I'm open to hearing more from the public.
So now are we gonna talk to Mike and the public and then come back for another
Well, I
meeting?
mean, this, like, this is a very, there's no consensus here, like, if you, this is not a room that has consensus, so, there's not. And that's what happens sometimes, and sometimes you have to talk about it more because you don't have consensus. And on something like this, you need to have a strong consensus, because it's going to be a decision
I
that
agree, but we
whichever
also
one it
need to
is,
somehow
get
this
there.
a little quicker, because in the meantime, since last
Okay.
fall, we've had
I agree with
a
that.
situation that is not working.
I would like to do it quickly, however, you've got 9 people here and you don't have consensus, so you can wish.
Well, then,
that
in
you
all
do.
seriousness, should we have an executive session policy meeting every single week and figure something out? Cause it's the end of April almost, and this started
Well, I think
last
I
August.
mean, I've said before that on policies such as this, it doesn't make sense to me to have, if this is a minefield of all sorts of, has all sorts of legal implications.
I understand that,
There's
but
questions
everything
that I
does,
know.
but it's been 8 months.
I know, but we never have, we don't have a person here that can actually answer the question with any authority.
Right, but then, I don't understand, I guess where I'm at is, that's fine to have a discussion and
Well,
conversation.
for example,
But when that was
okay.
suggested, not
I
that long ago.
didn't see that suggestion,
it-
but,
You were on it, you were on the
the-
communication of it.
I did not see that, and sometimes you don't see things in,
Which
very long
suggestion?
emails to
That
have
we
an
should meet
executive
again,
session.
like we, because
But-
it is a sensitive
Oh,
topic, it is a serious
yeah.
topic, and we should meet again and discuss it. Again, you better be,
I'm
knowing
okay with
all the
Well, I
things
did
that you discussed.
actually respond back and raise some questions, and I did communicate with the solicitor with additional questions I didn't get responses to. So,
That's fine.
I don't know
We're gonna have to.
how else I could have done, handled that, so. And since I didn't get answers to those questions, how can I make a decision?
Sounds like further conversation is needed.
So we will reach out to Mr. Miller
Yeah, I
to
think we have
schedule
some further
another
questions
conversation with him,
there to
hopefully
decide.
prior to the April board meeting.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes?
I think that's fair.
Thank you.
I didn't see anyone come up there, did they ever come up here? Oh, yeah, they did.
What's that? Yeah, I'm surprised.
I don't.
Amy Brown, West Rockville Township.
We can always decide.
Amy Brown, West Rockville Township. I do want to thank the board for addressing the bathroom and locker room concerns. I just recently became aware of it through the right to know requests. And I do appreciate you guys addressing it. I did start emailing the board, so thank you. I'm here to show my support of, I would like to say version 3, but I do understand there is the third district court. There's a lot going on here, right? Federal funding. My biggest thing is that we find something that is safe for all, right? Not that we put one group of students above another group of students. That we find something that provides a safe environment for all. I know there's students right now like not using the bathroom all day. There's students, calling out school for whatever reason. It's just not safe for any student right now. So my other question is what's the timeline on this? Is this going to happen quick? How is it going to be enforced? So when the policy is adopted, like how long is it gonna take to enforce that policy in the schools? If you go with option one, it's something like 5 different bathrooms, which the wording was not clear to me. I did not read it that way at all. When I read that this afternoon, when it was posted, I read that there was still 3 different bathrooms, and that as long as a parent or an emancipated student came to the school, then they could use whatever bathroom they wanted. So that really needs to be clarified. I don't think it's reading 5 bathrooms, it's still reading 3 bathrooms. Policy 3, my biggest concern, the locker room wording. It kind of mirrors that version 1, if a parent or an emancipated child can use whatever they choose. I didn't read it as a gender bathroom and a sex-based bathroom. So I think that really needs to be reworded and cleared up in there. Who's gonna fund 5 different bathrooms, right? And 4 different locker rooms? Like, how is this gonna happen? And how is it gonna happen in a fast, before next school year, before the end of this school year? Because really, it's not safe already for students, right? I think we're all in agreement on that. So the other question is, I know some bathrooms are closed right now, right? So how is it practical to have all these different bathrooms, and can students actually get to a bathroom that fits their need during their class break? Most kids can't, or the bathrooms are overcrowded because there's closed bathrooms right now. So it's not just a gender issue right now or a sex-based issue, it's availability also that's an issue right now that needs to be addressed. And when is it that going to be addressed? When you said you've known this for 8 months, that's an awful long time to put students at risk. Our jobs, like, I'll be honest, I'm in the military. My number one thing is risk management, right? Do we put the needs of many above the needs of a few, things like that. And I just think right now it's poor risk management. I think we're putting our children in an unsafe position. You mentioned keeping Penridge families in the district tonight multiple times. I think this is an issue that is going to make a decision for families. So it's really important we find a policy that's going to work for all families and keep all families in the district, because I can tell you firsthand, as soon as I saw those right to know requests, the emails that went out, I guess, at the beginning of the school year, showing that it is a free-for-all bathroom thing in high school right now, and that teachers are seeing girls and boys walk into bathrooms together. That, for me, I had not thought of leaving the district. There's things I don't agree with in the district right now, but my children are vested in the district. This right now is a decision that will affect whether we stay. And I don't think we're the only family with that issue. So I really ask that you find something that is going to work for all students. I don't think any one student should be a priority over another. It needs to be safe for all, whether male, female, transgender. It doesn't matter. We just need a safe spot for all people where they can. The priority here is education, and we need to get back to that.
Leah Rash, Hilltown Township.
Leah Rash, I agree. From what I hear in the high schools, there's much bigger problems with the bathroom than this. Like my kids say the same thing. You can't even get in them most of the time, and it's full of babies most of the time too. So there's big problems in the bathroom. But I do think that we could talk to the community and the parents, but I would suggest you also talk to some of these kids. They are interested in being somewhere they're not welcome. They're usually doing their best to make themselves invisible in these situations. They might have a very simple solution that could work. And just talk to them. Or not you guys, but someone in the administration, talk to them. Like, how would you like to handle going to the bathroom? Because there are students born genetically female, fully transitioned male in this school, beards, Adam's apples. That would not be good for them to walk into the girls' room. It would probably be very scary for some of the girls in the girls' room. And I bet you they don't want to be in there. They're like, I have no interest in going into the girls' room. So talk to them, see what they're already doing in the back, like to help mitigate the bathroom issue. You only answered like 2 of my questions around the surveying situations. This is a bad policy. You have no way of proving that you're implementing this properly. Even if we allow pays as like an opt-in, you have no way of proving that only the opt-in kids did it. Because it's anonymous. Like you can't go in and if a parent comes back and says, my kid did pays and I opted them out, and prove that they didn't do it. Because it's anonymous. There's no child's name on there anywhere. The problem is not such as or almost or some of these are examples. It's the personal beliefs in the front of it. That's where all the subjectivity is. Social issues are taxes, poverty. People have personal beliefs on taxes and poverty. If I am someone who has an issue with controversial subjects and I'm opting my child out, it's probably because I don't want them involved in those discussions. So, same thing, if like I didn't realize this survey was going to turn into a discussion around a controversial topic. Favorite basketball player, Brittany Griner. You don't think some parents are going to be like, why was she discussed in school today? Or he, I forget it. Where'd you go on vacation? We did a West Coast tour. We stopped in San Francisco for Pride Fest. It was awesome. I didn't know the vacation conversation was going to be talking about Pride Fest. We did a mission trip in South America. Why were these kids talking about religion in their vacation? Like, there isn't a boundary that a parent, in this policy as it's written, can't come back and hold your feet to the fire. And you're not going to have evidence supporting that you implement this policy well. Most of you comment a lot about what you do as a parent, and as everyone's right, how you feel as a parent, but you don't have a right to parent anyone else's children, and you certainly don't have an invitation to parent other people's children. So you want to opt your kids out, opt your kids out, that's fine. The PACE survey was designed to be helpful. It was put together when there was like mass shootings starting. It was developed to try and gauge what are we missing in these kids, that bad things are happening and the parents are like, how did this happen? It was a tool to help us. So saying it's research, I don't know what imagery you're supposed to conjure up by saying state conducted research on our children. I think that's sophistry at its finest. And so is drawing parallels between the bathroom issue and gym walls. Like that's just ridiculous.
Thank you. So just to follow up on a couple of things, you had, Mrs. Brown, you had asked about implementation and funding. As soon as it's passed, it can be implemented right away. And as far as funding, it really wouldn't cost the district money. It would be minimal modifications. There's already designated areas where we could make separate locker room facilities if that is the chosen, if version 1 is chosen, as well as designating specific a specific set of bathrooms and saying those are going to be gender as opposed to the other ones being biology. So that's something that can be done right away. If that answers your question. It would be, the policy has to go through, typically goes through 2 reads, so it would be 2 voting board meetings, and then it would go through after that. So we have a board meeting, a first read goes through at this upcoming board meeting, then next month at the next board meeting, right after that, it could be implemented. Mrs. Rash, you had shared about a lot of answers and comments and things that students would say and share. This policy has nothing to do with student speech whatsoever. It has to do with survey questions. Student answers has absolutely nothing to do with the policy and the survey questions.
Yeah, but my point was is that it was like a parent is opting their child out because they don't want them to be in that discussion, like in a controversial issue, right?
No, they're not opting out. What they're saying is
answers.
Okay, so they're not opting. They're not opting out. What they're saying is that if it's on a, if the question has to do, if the survey questions are on those issues, they want to be able to review the questions before allowing their child to participate and sign off to give permission.
So if they opt out, though, like, okay,
So usually, so what we do is we have public comment, and then at the end, I try to give answers. If you want to follow up with me and talk to me afterwards,
Okay.
I'll be happy to talk to you. All right, then we are adjourned.
Mr. Thomas, please let us know when the live stream